Today, the Guardian is reporting today that the Middle East crisis is getting out of control. The Houthis have been attacking ships that are in the Red Sea. You've got Iran that are going after ships in the Strait of Hormuz. This is a big problem, clearly, and it's led the Saudis to be concerned with getting nuclear weapons, which is something that the U.S. has been trying to avoid, but apparently the U.S. approved it, and now the deal might be in limbo, or the U.S. might not be approving it, but we're going to talk about that. The House has passed a $1.15 trillion NDAA. Now, the NDAA is something the government passes every year because it's the National Defense Authorization Act. This particular year, there is a provision in the NDAA that has some kind of merging of U.S. intel and military with the Israeli intel and military. This is a problem for a lot of people, and so we're going to discuss that. Rand Paul has put up a website, I guess, that has a bunch more information about COVID and the leaks and the lab leak theory. I guess Dr. Fauci is now in more hot water, or allegedly in more hot water. We'll see if anything comes, but we're going to talk about that a whole lot. And there was a stabbing in New York City, and the attacker yelled Allahu Akbar as he stabbed two men. So this is something that obviously we're going to talk about here. And one more big issue that we're talking about is there's been 20 deaths currently linked to ChatGPT so far. So OpenAI is facing litigation over this. AI is going to be something that is going to be in our lives, and we're going to talk about the ramifications for that. So, but before we get into any and all of that stuff, we want you to head on over to Bunker Branding and go ahead and pick up some Timcast merch. Right now we're showing you Ian's Betrayal. It's a bunch of the people from the Timcast crew. I'm over here in the back shooting at Ian. I mean, you've all seen me talk to Ian, and you know that I would never, ever harm Ian because he's a wonderful person. But head on over to Bunker Branding. Also, head on over to rumble.com so you can join us for the after show. Head on over to timcast.com where you can join our Discord and call in to the after show. But joining us tonight to talk about all of the things that we mentioned, Mike Benz.
Hello.
How are you, Mike? Who are you?
Great. I'm just a guy on the internet.
Okay, then. I mean, you guys know Mike, right? He's been here before. So, he'll talk about the blob, and he'll probably talk about CIA. And it seems like he'll probably have a couple things to say about the Rand Paul Fauci stuff. So Josie's here tonight.
Hi, everybody. I'm Josie. I'm the redheaded libertarian. I'm on X. I don't know, baby machine and queen of the trads.
Oh, hi, guys. 2 days in a row. How's it going? Brett,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
What's up?
Sorry, I just said I appreciate you, dude.
Yeah. I'm what they call the B team here. They pull me in when everybody's out of town, and that's okay. Normally doing PCC live 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You should join us there. It's a lot of fun, but we've got politics to get into, right, Carter?
We do. I'm Carter Banks. Thanks for watching tonight. We got Phil hosting, and Brett is here, Mike Benz, and Josie, the redheaded libertarian. I'm glad you all came. Let's get to the news.
All right, so from Reuters right now, Trump vows to punish Iran for Houthi attacks in the Red Sea as oil surges over $100. From Dubai, U.S. President Donald Trump promised on Thursday major military punishment for Iran and its Houthi allies after the Yemeni fighter struck two Saudi oil tankers in the Red Sea, extending the Middle East war to a second major shipping choke point. Fears that disruption could widen further to block another sea route sent global prices surging in one of the steepest rises of the war. Brent crude rose more than 6%, breaking through $100 a barrel for the first time since May. 2 weeks since the effective collapse of an interim truce meant to end the war, the U.S. military launched another round of airstrikes on Iran overnight into Thursday, prompting Iran to fire at neighboring Arab countries that house U.S. bases. Iranian state media said a missile struck Qasem Island on the Strait of Hormuz on Thursday evening, raising the prospect of further night attacks in a conflict well into its fifth month that has already killed thousands and raised fears of a global economic downturn. The Houthis getting involved in this and going after the Red Sea, it really is an escalation that could cause significant problems to the economy. The U.S. had really kind of had basically oil shipping and prices relatively managed, especially considering the predictions in February and April. People were talking about $200 a gallon or $200 a barrel oil, and the price of gas was going to go through the roof. And it seemed like as long as the conflict stayed in the Strait of Hormuz and between Iran and the U.S., that seemed like that was going to be kind of the same. But the Houthis getting involved now, going after the Red Sea, making sure that the problem escalates further across the region is something that is likely to continue to drive up oil prices. And it's going to be something that's going to make an already generally unpopular war very unpopular with the American people if the price of gas continues to go up. You know?
Yeah. I mean, the second front being opened is obviously going to cause a lot of headaches. One of the things that brought the price of oil down was the fact that a lot of ships were not, they respected the threat, so to speak, of shipping, containers being blown up and vessels being blown up in the strait. And, a deal looked like it was forthcoming on the table. The deal terms would be expected. It was always just around the corner for about a month and a half after about the 70-day mark in the war. And then, basically since the conflict reignited kinetically, we're now in this situation where ships did attempt to go through and then were getting blown up. That caused an escalation in the prices. And then with the Houthis now opening up a second front, there's a question about whether any, shipping is going to be able to move, basically through either front. And that is obviously going to have a number of spiral effects.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're not able to contain the Houthis. We tried to neutralize the Houthi problem last year. Yeah. With limited success.
Yeah, I mean, when it's an issue of the Strait of Hormuz, you have to worry about stuff that's coming out of any of those particular Gulf states. But when it comes to the Red Sea, then that's something where you're dealing with a lot of global traffic. It's not just oil. Trying to going through the Red Sea to get to the Med is one thing. Going around the Horn of Africa is a totally different thing. I've heard that it takes an additional 14 days to get around Africa or something. And, that's for any product that comes basically from Asia and heads to the West, right? So all of Europe has got to worry about this. Obviously, the U.S. does. I mean, I guess less so because you could feasibly or you could conceive of them going across the Pacific. But I don't know anything about shipping lanes. I don't know what it's like to go, across the Pacific or if that even happens very much.
That's why we need the Sub-Saharan Canal. Just make a canal straight through, like Eritrea, Ethiopia, just a straight line. Called the Donald Trump Sub-Saharan Canal.
There's talk of building, or at least the Saudis were talking about trying to divert around the
trying to do an overland kind of like railway type thing to be able to move, kind of by. But that creates its own problems. Now you're creating, bridges, and I mean, this is what we were classically doing to destabilize Syria. Is if you have oil pipelines or you have logistics over land, you can just bomb the logistics on land.
And the Houthis have no compunction about attacking that stuff.
So what do they do? Going into midterms, what do they do to try and stabilize oil prices? Because it doesn't look like this is stopping anytime soon. And like we've said before, midterms are largely predicated upon whether people are feeling it in their wallets. This can't stand if it makes it all the way to there. They're going to lose even more than people already are imagining they're going to.
They're going to do what they always do, is borrow against our reserves.
Yeah, they do that all the time, don't they?
Well, the ticking time bomb question is the reserves. I mean, one of the things that I think was shocking to a lot of people is were various disclosures made around the time the MOU was announced that part of the attempt to strike the deal was based on a perception that we were running low on oil reserves and had to actually strike some sort of détente in order to mitigate reserves from being depleted. And that was one of the things that I believe the Iranian foreign minister on X, in announcing the MOU, said that, the admin was in a position of desperation and that's why they did it. And then you had some contemporaneous statements around the depleted reserves. And who knows what's true or not true there, but that there is, if this escalates, it could make an MOU 2.0 a kind of functional necessity to strike ahead of the midterms.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a strong take on what it means for the midterms. I don't know how fast they can get a significant amount of Venezuelan crude actually into the market, as oil that can be refined or whatever. I don't know. I don't have a strong take. I do think that the Republicans are in a great position outside of this conflict. But considering, how much damage has already been done to Iran, I don't know that Iran is going to go ahead and be like, okay, if the U.S. were to say pull out and stop, right? Like, so there's a lot of people that are anti-war that are like, just stop, right? Just stop. It's a terrible idea. This is not going well. Just stop. If that were to happen, it doesn't go back to normal. Iran's not going to be, okay, you stop, blah, blah, blah. It'll be fine now. The rules have all changed regarding probably the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. So you're going to likely have to have the military guarding ships that want to go through the Strait of Hormuz, if at all, or Iran's going to say, well, we're just going to, close the strait when we feel like it or what have you, trying to apply pressure. So the idea that just pulling out fixes things, I don't see that as realistic. And so I'm not sure that there's any solution that the U.S. has that's good about the midterms. I think the most that the Republicans can rely on now is they can, first of all, like Josie said, Donald Trump can go into the strategic reserves, which I think is a bad idea.
I did it. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, especially for political motivations, that's a terrible idea. But that's possibly what they're going to do. And then they have to rely on how unpopular the Democrats are now. And the Democrats are not looking particularly well. We just had something on CNN, a bit from CNN a couple days ago, where the Democrats at this point in 2018 or whatever was, they were up by 16 points. And in 2000, I'm not sure exactly what it was. I'm not sure the dates, but the last two elections, they were up by 16 and up by 10. And now their lead is only +4, which is within the margin of error. So granted, the Republicans are in a very precarious position right now, and I don't think that it's likely that they're going to take the House or that they're going to take back the Senate, but they could keep the House even with those kind of numbers, because there's redistricting and the bad polling numbers that the Democrats are getting because of all the DSA candidates that are making a lot of noise in the news and stuff. And I think the American people, specifically people that are likely to go out and vote in the midterms, I don't think that they like the messages that they're hearing from the DSA.
And they're underfunded because of the USAID shutdown.
Yeah, that's honestly, I think Tim was talking about it the other day. I think they have 30 million or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's the Republicans have almost $1 billion through all the PACs and stuff, and I think the Democrats have something like 300 million or something like that. But it's a significant deficit, and when you have very little money and a bad message, you don't motivate people to go to the polls again. Especially when you're dealing with the people that like the DSA, they're young people, they're people that are not high propensity voters, and you're dealing with the people that are the high propensity voters. They're people that have, some property, they got houses. They don't want to hear people saying, "Oh, we're going to take we hate landlords," because they're Airbnb-ing their houses, and they don't want to hear that someone wants to be elected that's going to take away their property or something like that. And that's what they hear when they hear socialism. As much as young people are favorable to the idea or the term socialism, they think of it as just healthcare and free school. Older people, boomers and people my generation, they have a different understanding of socialism. They understand that there's a lot of expropriation, a lot of things that go along with it. So these high propensity voters, the boomers, they know exactly, or they have a certain conception of what the DSA is talking about, which likely actually aligns with what the DSA means. And they're not going to vote for them.
Is there a gap in the younger age of voters who show up for midterm elections in the left versus the right? Do more Democrats or more Republicans show up? Because I know that in general, young people don't vote unless it's the national elections and stuff like that, or presidential election. Yeah. Is there a gap between the left and the right and who shows up for midterms?
I don't have numbers, but my gut instinct is yes, because the left are the activists.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like,
Yeah.
because the way I was imagining what you were saying was that you're saying that like Republicans, or at least boomers who want to keep their property, are more likely to show up for this election because it's a midterm and the kids are going to stay home. But the way I think about it is that the activists are the one that show up for all the elections. That's why they win the school boards. That's why they win the local elections.
I think that's a good instinct, but at the same time, I think that the number of actual activists out there that'll get out and vote,
They're not funded anymore either.
they're not. But compared to the number of boomers, because Gen Z is a smaller generation, anyways. There are fewer people in Gen Z, and so you're dealing with, even if the numbers were 50-50, Gen Z being right and left, you're dealing with 5 or 10% that are actually the activists, and you've got all the boomers that are out there going to say, I want to, I don't want to elect someone that's going to take take things away from me. And I don't know, there are only certain districts where these people are running, and they have some kind of grassroots support or what have you. But I think, to Mike's point, without the USAID money, they just don't have the reserves to be able to get out there and say, hey, we're going to make a serious push.
And I don't know how useful past precedent and data is on this, because the MAGA revolution really changed a lot of young Republican dynamics. It used to be the case that Republican Party was sort of all older. The classic quote: if you're young and conservative, you don't have a heart. If you're old and liberal, you don't have a brain, sort of thing. And so you had a natural skewing of the younger demographic, I think, showing up just in the midterms, just by virtue of the young Democrats being the activist class. But I think that with the MAGA movement, you had a lot of young people, Charlie and the Turning Point sort of revolution, with diehards who would show up in, I suspect, in numbers that Republican, movements of the past did not. And I think that actually in the 2024 election, didn't Trump win it, at least in the white demographic? But I believe it was a historical sort of young people demo that was captured in 2024. And the key question is going to be, in my view, the mobilization of the new sort of nouveau MAGA hesitant, the kind of MAGA diehards who may or may not be feeling disenchanted because of certain policy pursuits of the admin. And this gets to a number of issues that are kind of playing out contemporaneously. Even in the Iran situation, the reason the MOU blew apart was because of the Israel-Lebanon provision in the MOU. And when the Israel sort of continued the ingress into Lebanon, that was perceived as a violation of the MOU. Then Iran began, firing on ships, saying, listen, we told you can't do this while Israel's in Lebanon. And there's sort of a tactical question about whether or not, senior leadership in the admin can sort of get some détente in Lebanon from the Israeli side, whether or not there's a sort of Israeli perception that doing so is the thing to do chronically, or the thing to do tactically in order to give support to basically, Republican chances of keeping that. This is one of the things that was talked about, was do you have a kind of Minsk Accord replay where in 2014, 2015, 2016, the Biden admin was striking these sort of détentes with Russia in the Ukraine Donbass war, but not really striking a peace that was intended to be permanent, but rather to kind of reload, because there was a sort of a need to reload. And there's a question of whether an MOU 2.0 is kind of struck with Israeli cooperation in order to get through the midterm, stabilize prices, and then immediately ratchet back up. But the problem is that's now been telegraphed pretty widely. Yeah. And you're basically telling voters, we are sort of doing this as a temporary thing, and then as soon as you vote us back in, we're going to relaunch this war you didn't want. So that's a tough thing to speak to the sort of MAGA hesitance now. And since that's the core demographic that, in my view, will determine the midterms, there's a real Rubik's Cube that's difficult to solve here politically.
I think that it's going to be really hard in the midterms because the coalition that got Trump elected has been shattered. So it wasn't just MAGA that got Trump elected. It was sort of the America First variation. It was MAHA, the MAHA moms. It was the libertarians. It was the disaffected liberals. And they all came together on a common cause. Like, you know what? We want healthier kids. We don't want war. We want the spending to be cut. And there's a lot of them that feel betrayed now because a lot of those promises were broken. And, as a libertarian, I will say right up, in the first 3 months of Donald Trump's presidency, he made at the Libertarian Convention, he made 32 promises to the libertarians. He made 20 to the world, but he made 32 to the libertarians, implied promises like I'm the anti-war president, and then actual promises. And he fulfilled 16 of those promises in the first 3 months, and then it stopped. And when it stopped, we ended up losing everybody that was in the administration for us, or everybody that was, we lost Thomas Massey, we lost MTG, we lost Joe Kent. Tulsi's gone. So who's left? RFK. That's really it. And then we're in war, and then everything is anti-Semitic. So people are just feeling disaffected, and disaffected people don't vote. They don't tend to vote.
16 is way better than most presidents.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it was great. I was so optimistic in those first 3 months, and then it was like a switch flipped.
Well, I mean, not to sound like I'm just cheerleading the administration, but I think that the things that Trump promised that he hasn't been able to deliver likely were not within the scope of the presidency, unless you want to list them off and
I have them written down. I don't have
them
all memorized. 32 promises.
The point that I'm making is Trump will run his face,
Yep.
right? And a lot of times he'll say, yes, I'm going to do this, or I want to do that, or what have you. And, that doesn't mean that it's actually in the scope of the presidency. So, and I think a lot of people that are critical of Donald Trump, a lot of times they were expecting more than a president could deliver. That being said, the whole idea of the MAGA coalition being shattered and stuff, I don't know, I'm not particularly plugged in with the MAHA stuff. That was never my kind of perspective. But I understand that there are a lot of people that feel like the president hasn't delivered for them. And, as far as, because my major concern was deportations and ending just the caravans of people coming in. For me, I'm like, all right, at the very least, we've got that. So, I'm not like, oh, this has been, gangbusters and stuff.
But it's you have to have some level of expectation that's not at the highest level, right? Like I said last night on the show, I said I expected maybe we get some continued tax cuts for the citizens, and we get some deportation. That was about where I expected it to be. But the point was, he advertised himself as somebody who was going to tear down the system and build something new. Now, maybe I'm just politically naive, but I didn't imagine that to be possible. And I imagine all presidents as overpromising. So if you can get 2 to 3 of the things that they're talking about, well, that's, it's, not getting more doesn't mean I'm going to go vote for Ro Khanna or a Democrat.
But to Josie's point, though, if people don't feel like they've got enough, no matter how much they've got, right? Just like a situation when it comes to we talk about kitchen table issues. It doesn't matter how much money someone's making. It's, do they feel like their dollar is going as far as it should? Because people vote on feelings. So if there are people out there that were like, look, I wanted Donald Trump to do this, and they don't feel like he's doing the things that they want, you can't get them up to go to the polls, especially when it's an off year.
Should have done the glyphosate stuff.
Yeah, what?
The glyphosate. It was remember the one show I was I woke up one day and I just see one issue voters on glyphosate, and I'm just like, bro.
I don't even know what I know that's a MAHA thing, but
it is. It's Roundup, and it's illegal in other countries, and it really affects the quality of our food. That's why when you go to Italy, you feel fine when you eat wheat, but when you come to America, you feel like crap. And Roundup was being sued. or Bayer, who they kind of
got,
were
like-
over $11 billion they were sued for. And I think isn't one of the things that they passed saying, oh, you can't sue
Yeah,
anymore.
you can't sue
You
them.
can't sue them anymore. So, and when they were sued over cancer. People were getting cancer, and they were sued for $11 billion. You can't sue anymore.
And I
Well,
get it. Like,
is it because you can't sue because they were found?
It's because you can't sue because they're
just like COVID.
they're
you can't sue the-
corporate.
yeah.
But were they found guilty and they had to, or was the finding against the company that?
I'm not sure those logistics of it, but you can't sue this big corporation anymore. You're not allowed to.
And it was like, I saw that. I'm like, look, I get it, because especially if you're branding yourself as Maha, then this is a singular issue that you care about extremely. But I don't buy that if the next Democrat comes into office that they're going to have strong positions on glyphosate either. And I guess it's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. But I get it. Like, a lot of people felt like they were let down with those promises. And the other thing is Charlie Kirk's murder has also shattered the coalition in the same way. You mentioned Turning Point earlier. Like, fundraising and Turning Point isn't the same fundamentally that it was a couple of years ago, and that's another blow against the administration, is they don't have that access to the youth in the same way that they did before, as far as fundraising and getting the kids out and really active in the community. Everybody knows that when it comes to door knocking, Democrats do it 1,000 times better, and they're 1,000 times more effective.
Well, exactly. And that is how they became what they are, the behemoth that they are. This goes back to McCarthy, and it goes into the Vietnam War. They know how to get together, they know how to mobilize, and they know how to get things done. And the fact that they vote in midterms means that they get into the school boards, and they get into the selectmen, and they get all these small little places where they infiltrate, and then they work their way up in the system from
Change
there.
the laws.
Exactly, and they change the laws. They work their way up. They influence your children, and that's how it's always been. So that's why McCarthy didn't go far enough.
No. I seconded on that point. We're going to jump to this story, and it ties in with what we were talking about. So from the Washington Post, the Saudi nuclear deal is in doubt as Trump adds a new condition regarding Israel. A day after the agreement was signed, the president laid out a new requirement that the Saudis normalize relations with Israel. Nothing like signing a deal and changing the rules afterwards. Saudi Arabia would need to normalize relations with Israel to receive the U.S. nuclear technology it has long sought, President Donald Trump said Thursday, adding a new and potentially deal-ending stipulation to an agreement signed just a day earlier. The nuclear deal, which was fiercely opposed by Israel and others concerned about nuclear proliferation — I'm not sure if it's really nuclear proliferation when it comes to Israel being concerned about the Saudis, but either way, is totally subject to Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, Trump said in a social media post. Referring to the effort from his first term to normalize relations between Israel and the Muslim-majority countries from which it had long been estranged. The Saudis have thus far refused to join the accord. It was the latest whiplash-inducing policy shift from the White House, which had faced down considerable political opposition to push forward with the Saudi deal. The Biden administration also discussed a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia, but tied any agreement to opening diplomatic relations with Israel, a move that has the potential to reshape dynamics in the Middle East, but which remains distant. If the Saudis don't join the Abraham Accords, the deal is off, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt said a few hours after Trump's post, responding to questions from reporters. I know that obviously one of the big problems that the administration and other previous administrations have noted about Iran getting a nuclear weapon is it would force Saudi Arabia to get it, or you would basically say.
Can I ask an R-tarded question first? Is this talking about nuclear weapons or nuclear energy?
Nuclear energy?
It's energy, but the issue is any civilian nuclear energy program
Can
is
be
sort of de facto dual use.
Okay, yes, that changes the whole.
Yeah, because I mean, look, Saudi Arabia is sitting on a ton of oil, so it's not like they particularly need nuclear energy, but
Well, the idea is by shifting to nuclear energy, they can export more of that oil.
okay.
And that also would help bring down by putting more supply on the market, it helps bring down the
cost.
price of it. At a time like this, when there could be permanent perturbations in the global supply because of this would actually help a lot in a lot of ways. And this is part of the broader Saudi strategy of diversifying into non-oil fields. and they're doing this in all sorts of.
We were just talking. Brett and I were just talking about that this morning on PCC. They're going
Project 2030 or whatever they call their operation. That's why WWE is so heavily featured over there now. Why they have the comedians out there to do the shows. They want to become not just a destination for American entertainment or American citizens, but a net exporter for a lot of this stuff.
The idea is it's almost like being a cocaine dealer. Like if you wean yourself off the coke habit, you have more to ship. This is the 10 crack commandments, the biggie, never get high on your own supply. Like they can just use all that supply as revenue rather than having to, use it domestically to power everything.
To be fair, I'm of the opinion that burning oil is probably not the best use for it, considering it's basically like it's basically like modern society fuel. Like everything we use is made of oil, petrochemicals, fertilizer, all the plastics, all the tires, like all of this stuff that
pharmaceuticals,
that makes modern life possible. Like it's all a derivative of oil. And so just burning it in cars does honestly seem, when you have other alternatives, it does seem kind of like a waste. I mean, I know I'm a little bit biased because I've got an electric car, but there are far better uses for oil, and so it makes sense to not need to burn as much as we do. And if Saudi Arabia wants to get on nuclear power, I mean, I do feel like the Saudi government is fairly responsible as an international kind of organization, but I think that there are a lot of elements in Saudi Arabia that are very, very hostile to the U.S. still. I mean, you look at the 9/11. How many people for 9/11 were Saudis and stuff? Oh, come on. No, I saw your face though. It's not like they were from, it's not like they were Russians from, they were from Moscow or whatever, no matter who funded them or whatever. But so I do think that there are a lot of elements.
Was the CIA chief in Riyadh at the time?
I don't know. Who was it?
John Brennan?
Oh, yeah. And wasn't he a Muslim?
I guess he just missed the, have you ever read Michael Springman, the visa chief? In the State Department consulate at the time, who was surrounded 75% of the staff was CIA, wrote this book called Visas for Terrorists about that whole affair, and it's eye-opening.
The thing that sucks is he's still walking around free.
Brandon, well, yeah, but the pressure's on him.
But anyways, but more to the point, like I don't think that the Saudis having nuclear power is such a big threat to the U.S. But I do think that, making a deal and then saying, oh, you have to change the deal after it's been agreed to, that's a massive problem. Like you can't sit there and be like, oh, now you have to go ahead and hang out with our friend too. It's like, like you've already set the conditions for the deal, So
I mean, so what you have is kind of a left-hand, right-hand relationship with the Saudis and the Israelis in the Middle East, which, in each case goes back 80 years. And in particular, the Republican Party and within that, especially the MAGA movement, the Saudis have been early and often supporters. Both the Israelis and Saudis came together in support of Trump, really, ahead of the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton, in large part because both the Saudis and Israelis hated the Iran deal that Obama struck. And this caused MBS in Saudi and the Netanyahu government in Israel to really clamor behind Trump as a counter-Iran maximalist. And it really brought the Saudis and Israelis together in an alignment against Iran, from the Saudi perspective because Iran competes commercially, and from the Israeli perspective because of the security and other sort of regional dominance concerns. But I think that this is basically a way of tanking it. This condition Saudi is not going to agree to, and it looks like the administration, just purely speculative, just how it reads on its face, is that they wanted to do this, and then the Israeli delegation put a lot of pressure on and said, you have to add this. And our delegation, knowing it would kill the deal, but wanting to respect the Israelis, laid it on the table, and it basically kills it. So I think this is basically late stage pressure from the Israeli side and this is because of the local rivalry. The Israelis don't want the Saudis to be able to have this capacity. MBS in Saudi has said that they would only develop nuclear weapons if Iran did, but obviously the Saudis being a nuclear power sort of changes the security balance in case there's ever a conflict between the Israelis and the Saudis, which is, without the U.S. sort of peacemaking that, is not off the table, sometime in the decades ahead. But once you have nukes forever. And, this could also cause a domino. What other Gulf states, you say, hey, the Saudis have it, us as well. And then it would...
Do you think it'd be likely that if the Saudis were to get some kind of nuclear weapon, do you think that they would be like, oh, UAE will go ahead and we'll give you this technology or something like along those lines?
Yeah, it's quite possible. I mean, the Saudis are kind of the alliance kingmakers in the region, and this also is something that I think the Democrats are currently in a bind in terms of Middle East relations because of the legacy Iran deal and some of the just stakeholder relationships with donors and whatnot with the DNC, where the Democrats are in large part significantly opposed to both MBS and Saudi and the Netanyahu government. And I don't think that, for example, a Democrat administration would want to strike this sort of deal with the Saudis and give them this dual use capacity. So I think there's sort of a time sensitivity to try to do this right now from the administration side. But like I said, I think this is a way of basically calling the deal off.
All right, we're going to jump to another story that actually involves Israel. From Fox News, chaos erupts as House passes $1.15 trillion defense bill with Israel provision. And I don't know why this is part of the headline, but it says, "Stop stoking Jew hatred." I don't know who said that. We'll get into that. Let's see. From Fox News, the House passed its $1.5 trillion annual defense policy bill Wednesday after a bipartisan revolt over a provision expanding U.S.-Israel defense technology cooperation. The fiscal year 2027 NDAA passed 216 to 212, with Republicans largely supporting and Democrats mostly opposing the measure. The annual bill, which sets Pentagon policy and typically draws broad bipartisan support, received only 6 Democrat votes, as much of the caucus objected to Section 219 and the Republican-backed amendment restricting transgender care and easing access to personal guns on military bases. Is it really, really? That's something they're going to talk about? Anyways, opposition came from a coalition of progressive Democrats and Republican skeptics of U.S. support for Israel, who accused congressional leaders of shielding the provision from scrutiny after lawmakers were denied a separate vote to remove it. A fight erupted as support for Israel has weakened among House Democrats and some America First Republicans during the war in Gaza and the widening conflict with Iran. Just 1 week earlier, 103 Democrats joined Rep. Thomas Massie from Kentucky in voting to block $3.3 billion in U.S. aid to Israel. For opponents, Section 219 would move the relationship in the opposite direction by embedding U.S.-Israel cooperation more deeply inside the Pentagon's weapons development and acquisition system. The provision would direct the War Secretary to designate a Pentagon executive agent to coordinate and accelerate bilateral defense research, testing, and industrial cooperation. Critics argue that the structure would make the relationship harder for future administrations or Congress to unwind and could shift parts of the partnership away from highly visible aid votes into less visible technology, procurement, and production arrangements. Supporters said it would coordinate long-standing programs and give the United States faster access to Israeli defense technology. Josie, you were saying that this is, and I've heard a lot of libertarians saying that this is merging the U.S. military with Iran, and I'm sorry, with Israel. I'm probably going to do that again too.
Iran.
And as soon as I saw that, I was like,
nope, that's
I
not
don't
what's
buy
happening.
that they're merging the militaries. So it sounds like they're basically taking existing programs programs and making cooperation easier. What do you know about this?
So first, it's a semantic argument. This is what happens because the concerns about this are very real, okay? But the people who are concerned about it aren't wording it quite right. It's not a merger of the militaries. And when they say that, then it's trivialized. And people who are in support of this are able to trivialize it. So it's merging their military industrial complexes, essentially, is what that is. So it significantly undermines American sovereignty. Okay, it embeds Israeli tech into our weapons programs and our supply chains. And as the article said, it makes it so that Congress, who would normally vote on this every year with appropriations, can't do that anymore. It's going to be a different thing. So they can't choose and be like, okay, maybe we don't want this year. They won't be able to do that. And it also makes decoupling in the future almost impossible at this point, because we know NDAAs. Nothing ever gets changed in them. That's why we have the Propaganda Act was pretty much abolished.
The Smith-Mundt Authorization Act.
Exactly. So it lifted the domestic dissemination ban. We're never going to get that back. So as soon as it goes into that, it's a really bad thing. And what's big about this is that, yes, we do have these past agreements, but what it's doing is it's making our military depend indefinitely on the industry success and the policy success of a foreign nation. And once we're in that position, we have stared far too long into the abyss, and we are becoming the foreign entanglement in the permanent alliance that George Washington warned us about. And there's a slew of other issues that come with this too. Like it talked about an agent that's going to oversee all of this.
Executive agent, yeah.
Yes, an executive agent. So our founders didn't think we were ever going to merge military industrial complexes with another country. So the closest thing we have to this in the Constitution is treaty law. But they're bypassing the treaty law. This isn't even a treaty. This is something entirely different. So there's no check and no balance for this guy. What is it? They're going to have to make something up, and it's not going to be constitutional. And then we have to get into espionage, okay? Oh my gosh, Josie, our greatest ally, they would never spy on us. Oh, contraire.
Well, I mean, everybody knows that.
The Pentagon's
everybody knows
DIA,
that everybody spies on
yes,
everybody.
the Pentagon's DIA last month said that they did a risk assessment on Israeli spying, and they ranked them at the highest level possible, the critical. They're critically spying on us. And 4 weeks later, we're like, oh, you know what's a great idea for these people who are critically spying on us? Let's merge our tech, or let's merge their tech with our military. What a great idea. That sounds insane to me. And of course, since I'm not being really nice to Israel right now, let's talk about Qatar, okay? Qatar, didn't they give our country a plane? They gave our country a plane, right, for our president to fly around in. Now, when that happened, weren't there very legitimate concerns about safety and tech and spying that happened in that time? Yes, there were. So this isn't good when anybody does this. As a consistent person, I'm against all of that. And let's get into the votes. So Thomas Massie put forth an amendment. And in that amendment, he said, let's strip the NDAA of Section 219. And the Rules Committee took one look at it, and they're like, absolutely not. And they made an executive decision. They didn't send it off to the House, and it just kind of vanished. But what they did send to the House was the rules as they existed. And that included with blocking Massey's amendment to strip the NDAA or strip 219 out of the NDAA and like protect the ND or protect the 219 in the NDAA. And everybody except Massey, all the Republicans voted in favor of that. So then the NDAA comes and it's time to vote for the NDAA. And 6 Republicans joined Thomas Massie in saying, I'm going to vote against this because of Section 219. But that vote was meaningless, and that vote was performative, and that vote was safe because they just voted for the rules that blocked Thomas Massie from stripping that amendment. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, so there's the Section 219. They were also talking about Democrats were not backing it because of amendments restricting transgender care and easing cases and easing access to personal guns on military bases. Is that just like misdirection, or is that something that?
Well, I think what they're getting at is there may have been some pro-Israel Democrats who were torn with between their own coalition because it's a package deal. You know, if you vote for this, then you are also voting for restricting the transgender care sort of thing. So there may have been some, the vote tally may have been slightly different. I think it's just all they're trying to get at there. This direction.
I mean, this is one of the closest. The NDA usually passes very easily, right? I mean, even when there was the I forget what it was, but there's been a couple times where libertarians were pretty concerned about NDAs. I think generally they are, but there have been a few issues about monitoring of.
Yeah, even the Smith-Mundt repeal. The Modernization Act was tucked into an NDA. That's why you couldn't get it out. It's the must pass, especially right now when we're in multiple wars. Yeah. And that was on like almost every continent.
14 years ago, too.
2012.
Yeah.
It was 2012. So that's 14 years ago.
Yeah,
Right.
and also locking people up without any.
Yeah.
And definitely that was in an NDA.
And they still get passed with basically very broad bipartisan support.
We love FISA here.
But on this, there are a couple of things about it that are a little bit eye-popping in light of everything else playing out around the MAGA coalition dynamics, and as we talked about, Republican, sort of MAGA hesitant voter mobilization. That this has been a wedge issue, I would say, since the 12-day war last year. For this to be happening just a couple months ahead of the midterms, when sort of the key coalition base that you're trying to mobilize are those, that you may have lost because of prior endeavors around this issue. There is a very real path dependency problem with this. Like a couple examples. So, when we sell F-35s to foreign countries, they want the latest and greatest jets, and we sell them for a huge markup. But at the end of the day, we kind of have a kill switch on the tech. If
and they
we're
don't
ever in a conflict with them, or if they're ever being intransigent in negotiations on trade, or any oil or anything else, we can always threaten to, hey, you're going to turn the keys off on the fighter jets, and you're going to be left with nothing. And so there is a dependence on the underlying tech, to say nothing of the issues around, the fact that they could be bugged, for example. There could be, encryption things on the back end that, you're not aware of. And this stuff is not necessarily all open source. And there's an issue that I remember happened around AI and the Pentagon trying to get Anthropic out of the AI chain. And I spoke to folks in the Pentagon around this, because Anthropic is a very, very heavy DNC Democrat kind of cesspool. Claude really is the best in class right now in AI as it currently stands. But there were problems between Anthropic and the Pentagon and all this kind of political stuff. So, but the Pentagon was having a real hard time getting Anthropic out of their systems, because the interoperability problem is vast. You have so many systems that run on it, and you can't just piecemeal change one thing without another thing getting affected, and you form a sort of structural dependency at the base layer that would be prohibitively expensive or time-consuming, with sensitive in-process things happening that you just can't branch off of it in the way that you might desire, because you have this sort of core dependency. And you could see something similar happening, with respect to this 219, where if, for example, one of the questions when you think about this Saudi deal, and as I mentioned, this looks like this was some kind of late stage intervention by the Israeli delegation, and the White House sort of sided with the Israeli delegation on it and inserted this provision, knowing it would kill the U.S.-Saudi deal. And the question is, well, what kind of leverage can a foreign country deploy, for example, when the delegation makes that ask? And sometimes it's over trade, sometimes it's over, industrial concerns, sometimes it's over security ones. But another one is, if you don't do this, then we will cut off your access to this. We will limit our, security, our technology. And once you have Pentagon systems that are dependent on that base route, that becomes another point of leverage in any negotiation, whether it's security related or not. And now there already are significant Pentagon dependencies on this. I mean, the sort of Unit 8200 and Amman, type Israeli tech is already in significant use, at the Pentagon level. So it's not like this is something from nothing, but the legal requirement to do it and the fact that it is Pentagon wide, the executive agent has a Pentagon wide. This is not like one, just one thing. This is all Pentagon systems effectively that will have this sort of mandatory Israeli military industrial complex integration. And there's really no precedent for this sort of thing. And it's happening concomitantly with the push, I believe, by Tom Cotton for mandatory intelligence sharing, making it illegal to not share certain classified information with Israeli counterparts. And
what does that look like? A mandatory intelligence sharing, right? So obviously, well, not obviously. I would presume that doesn't mean every bit of intelligence that the U.S. comes up with or produces. Is it only stuff that's pertinent to Israel, or is it anything that Israel comes and says they want? And how would the Department of War say, well, this stuff you can have or this stuff you can't have, if there's some kind of legal framework that says you have to give it to them?
Well, this is 622 from Tom Cotton, who is the Senate Intelligence Committee chairman. He sponsored this, and this is not just Pentagon. This is the entire intelligence community, and it primarily relates to things around regional threats, but it goes broader than that. It includes plans and intentions of both state and non-state actors. So, for example, if the CIA were to learn about plans or intentions of Hezbollah or something, or the Houthis, or the Iranians, or the Qataris, and it would have an impact materially, potentially, on Israeli foreign policy or national security, that effectively the intelligence community would be required by law. It would be illegal not to share that with the Israelis unless the president himself intervenes with and puts forward a justifiable legal reason under U.S. national security not to. So it creates a legal mandate only overridable by the president himself, and that is something that in good times is something that can be a good practice when you're dealing with an ally, but that's also, it sort of presupposes 0 degrees of daylight around interests, and that's something that is, when it's done by the legislature, is hard to undo, and it sort of creates a signaling to even try to undo it. It's almost like to undo it in the future is to sort of attack the alliance itself, and has its own political baggage. But the fact that it's coming from the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, the most powerful person in the Senate overseeing the CIA, shows you the kind of institutional support there is for that. And there is the question about, this is one more sort of mandatory integration. It would be literally illegal not to do it. So it's a permanent. It represents a permanent change in the way we handle our own classified documents. And so, but that's also happening concurrently with, this 219.
All right, I think we're gonna jump to another story that Mike has some info on. From Fox News, Rand Paul releases docs that reveal FBI halted border inspection of virus research over Wuhan lab links. Mike sent me a boatload of links, but we're gonna read the story here first. Agents with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection were preparing to question a British zoologist and disease ecology expert upon his return to the United States from the World Health Organization's investigation into the origins of COVID-19 before the FBI intervened and asked agents to stand down, according to files released Monday by Senator Rand Paul. They told the public a COVID lab leak wasn't plausible, Rand wrote on X. Their own private messages say otherwise. Today, I'm launching the reading room where the public can view records related to my ongoing investigation, not just conclusions, but the actual documents. It's funny that they called him by his first name there, huh? The documents show CBP's National Targeting Center flagged Peter Daszak as a high person of interest ahead of his February 5th, 2021 arrival at JFK International Airport. Daszak, the former president of EcoHealth Alliance, was flagged because of more than 15 years of collaboration with the Wuhan Institute of Virology and his long-standing relationship with its lead researcher, Zhengli Shi, as well as his role as principal investigator on National Institutes of Health grants and funding bat coronavirus research in China. Much of the funding Daszak received was put forward towards gain-of-function research, the documents state. Now, the gain-of-function research stuff, Fauci swore up and down that didn't happen, right?
And he lied.
And he did it under oath.
He lied under oath, and then he got a pardon for the crime.
That was the Biden administration pardoned him.
Yes.
So why don't you go ahead and unpack a little bit of this for the viewers so they understand exactly what the reading room means and what kind of information Rand Paul has kind of made available.
So this is coming from Senator Rand Paul, who has been, an absolute pit bull on this issue since the pandemic itself. But this is sort of a continuation in a long line of disclosures that he's obtained around the intelligence community relationship with COVID, around the researchers, around the sort of cover up in media institutions. What was just made public by Senator Paul were the Slack messages between the authors of the Proximal Origin paper in March 2020, which was the sort of official explanation at the early stages of the outbreak about how this could not possibly humanly, scientifically, theoretically, hypothetically, at all have come from a lab, namely the Wuhan lab, that this was zoonotic in origin. This came from probably a pangolin, sort of thing. And
Bat soup, right?
Yes, right. Well, this paper was highly influential in quelling the early questions about the Wuhan lab. And what Senator Paul just published were the internal communications between the authors of this paper, showing that they didn't believe anything that they were saying and that they were lying. They knew they were lying, and then they themselves subsequently got more and more shocked about the disclosures around the Wuhan lab. So to name a few highlights that stand out about this is, they were frequently referring to, they said that the majority of the researchers that they spoke to thought it leaked from a lab. They admitted in their own Slack chats that they lied about. There's a line in the Proximal Origins report where it tries to downplay the gain-of-function bat-borne coronavirus research being done at the Wuhan lab, saying that this is done all over the world in BSL-2 labs, like lower security. This research is done all over the world. The fact that it's done in the Wuhan lab doesn't say much because it's done everywhere. So if they were, so it's really not that significant that it was also done in Wuhan. And
that was the Bryce Nichols tweet that you sent, right?
Yeah.
So right here.
And what they say is, but that isn't, if you see, it says, we describe in the paper and say that this work is performed all over the world, but that isn't true. It's exclusively been going on at the Wuhan lab. And so, for 6 years, the official explanation is, this is ordinary course, happens all over the world, but turns out it was only happening at the very lab where the intelligence community assessment is that it leaked from and where the outbreak, it broke out in Wuhan, China.
Yeah.
And at the BSL-4 lab, which is the highest security lab. It's the BSL-4 lab is the star of Outbreak, the 1995 Dustin Hoffman movie. But this. But what I'm getting at here is, this was a lie that they told knowingly in order to quell this, and then they seem to get so convinced in these messages that they're frequently joking that they're surprised that it leaked in Wuhan. and that it didn't leak in Raleigh, North Carolina, where the UNC Chapel Hill lab is, and that was of course run by Ralph Barrick, and Ralph Barrick and the EcoHealth and Peter Daszak boys. Daszak and Barrick are kind of the two domestic stars of this. Ralph Barrick, Rand Paul showed, had been working with the CIA and ODNI on bat-borne coronavirus research. He published their redacted comms in 2015 and the like. But this goes back to USAID. One of the most significant parts of these revelations, in my view, is the DARPA diffuse and preempt programs. The DARPA, so effectively, and I sent you one of the comms on this, if you can put it up on the screen at some point. This is the DARPA diffuse and DARPA preempt comms on this. So here's what shocked even the authors of the March 2020 Proximal Origins paper, the cover-up paper. They did not know until 2021, a year after they published this paper, that Peter Daszak had proposed, together with Ralph Barrick, a gain-of-function program to do bat-borne coronavirus, super-juicing bat-borne coronaviruses at the Wuhan lab to DARPA in 2018, just 1 year before the outbreak. And this is something, so basically the unique feature of SARS-CoV-2 was this insertion of a fern cleavage site that is evidently never been seen in a beta coronavirus before. And this is a very unique feature that sort of distinguishes what COVID is. And as it turns out, Peter Daszak himself, together with his USAID-funded team, proposed to DARPA to create the very thing that COVID turned out to be the year before COVID happened at the very lab in the very town it broke out in. And so because these Slack messages go into that later time period, they describe what was an effective betrayal in their view, that they came out and published this paper not knowing, they were covering up for Daszak and Barrick, not knowing that they had proposed to DARPA to actually create the biological the biological identical equivalent of what COVID is in that very lab.
So this is the piece that you're talking about from DARPA, right? Dr. Ralph Barrick testified to Rand Paul's committee in April that the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency preempt program solicited proposals for gain-of-function experiments almost 2 years before the COVID-19 pandemic, right?
Well, that's Barrick's testimony about it. But if you look for the comms between, I believe, Christian Anderson on it, you can see how they reacted to the news that I believe the group Drastic published. They learned, what's so funny is these insiders in the virology, epidemiology profession, these esteemed researchers and scientifically acclaimed high-profile figures learned about the DARPA proposal the same time as the internet did, and were themselves gobsmacked that they went out on the line to defend Daszak and Barrick, not saying it couldn't have been a lab leak. And then they learned, oh my God, they were actually creating COVID in the lab, in that very lab where it leaked from. Now the defense on this is that, so basically you had two programs happening simultaneously. You had a USAID program and a DARPA program. USAID in 2009 created something called PREDICT. And this was basically a global program to collect hundreds of thousands of virus samples and then run various experiments on them in order to sort of chronicle potential outbreaks and develop vaccines, to defend against them. That's where the gain of function comes in. You super juice a virus in order to create a vaccine to defend against in case that virus makes the jump, that variant of it. And so USAID had been funding Daszak, Barrick, that whole team for basically 15 years. From 2009 up until 2024, USAID had been running this this program. And in particular, what USAID did, it funded Peter Daszak to go into the Yunnan bat caves in southern China and collect tens of thousands of bat samples to bring to the lab in Wuhan, the Wuhan Institute for Virology. And so Daszak had this very deep relationship with the Wuhan lab on USAID payroll to bring all of these bat samples to be tested on in Wuhan for, basically a decade before the outbreak in 2019. Then in 2018, Daszak applies for this DARPA grant to say, listen, we have all these USAID-funded bat samples in the lab. We want to super juice them with gain of function, and we want to insert a furin cleavage site into this to make it more easy to modify. And
basically making monster bugs.
Right. And DARPA had this pre-existing preempt program. So you had these you had the USAID Predict program and the DARPA preempt program. And this was sort of the USAID was funding, collecting the bat samples, and DARPA was sort of, developing vaccines on the basis of all the samples that USAID and the maintenance of the, research community and everything that USAID was funding. So while Daszak and Barrick are working basically with both of these, USAID and DARPA, they go to the DARPA side of this, knowing that the USAID program money was about to run out, I believe in 2020 or something like that. Daszak pitches in 2018 this diffuse proposal under the preempt program to do this. And the official story is that DARPA declined this grant, this proposal. And so the idea was, even though it looks shady as hell that the EcoHealth Alliance network working directly with the Wuhan lab was proposing to create COVID under the diffuse proposal, at the end of the day, DARPA said no, right? So they didn't get the DARPA money, is the official story on this, to do this. But the question is could they have taken that USAID money or the NIH grants that they had and done it anyway? For a number of reasons. They could claim scientific breakthroughs, they could show some success, they could simply, they're already in the lab experimenting on these. Just because DARPA didn't go through with it, or maybe were there comms? Like, we still don't have the DARPA side of this. This is one of these things where getting the internal DARPA comms would be huge on this. Like, there's going to be a contracting officer. There's going to be all levels up and down the chain, reviewing this. Congress doesn't have the ability to pull people from DARPA in and have them testify, or is it classified stuff? Or I mean, they ostensibly they would be able to do it behind closed doors. Well, this is my ask, since Dr. Paul, if you're listening, get the DARPA internal comms. I know that you're deposing Fauci or something next week. You've done excellent diligence on the CIA and ODNI and NIH and now the Proximal Origins Front. But the DARPA internal comms will be very revealing in terms of the continuing relationship. For example, we don't know the reason that the diffuse proposal was turned down. It could be that they may not have thought it was viable, maybe come back after you've shown signs of success. There could have been comms that said, listen, we're not going to give you the money at this point, but if you have a more promising blueprint for the amount of money that you're asking for, come back and show. This is a common thing that happens with these grant and contract negotiations is, listen, it sounds good in concept, but we don't want to bet on this startup proposal unless you have already shown it's got a high likelihood of success. So it's very possible that even if he didn't get authorized by DARPA to do it, that he did it in order to qualify for a renewed proposal. But then the outbreak happened the very next year, potentially with the very samples that he could have been running those experiments on. The question was he doing it were they doing it anyway? And there's a number of ways to get at that. One is the DARPA communications. Another is the USAID communications. Another are the Columbia and the UC Davis communications, because The USAID program was administered by UC Davis and Columbia and Stephen Morse in that network. And to date, we don't have any of those comms, files, records, emails, chat logs, any of that. It goes dark at the Dashik level. But Dashik was reporting up to his grant officers at NIH, at USAID, at DARPA under the preempt. And we need all of that. And we need it all unredacted. There should be nothing at this point that undermines U.S. national security about those communications. Nominally, these were not, this is not a classified program at NIH or AID or DARPA. And so that's the next logical step. We should have a stack of JFK files level, 100,000 documents over the course of all these years between Dashik, Barrick, and the various grant officers.
Okay, so what kind of, what's the likelihood that any of these communications would be able to be brought to like the public? Is this stuff that's, like I said, is it classified, or is it something that you could actually show the American people?
Well, this comes down to a threshold decision that the administration will be forced to make if this is how much transparency to give on this. I texted you a very revealing comedic moment in this Slack chat between the cover-up artists there. If you can pull up the quote around the Chinese conference, it says $15,000 and $15 million. And if you look for the one where he says, I'm about to give this talk,
from KGA to Bob on Chinese speaking fee.
Yeah, the Chinese speaking fee one. This gets to this comedic relief gets to the sort of heart of the issue about disclosure and whether or not this can or might be made public.
Give me 1 second here.
It was a speaking fee for what? For just like a conference or something?
I almost don't want to reveal the punchline because it's so funny, and you have to remember the context that this is playing out in the middle of the first Trump administration blaming China, and you have these sort of Chinese affiliated researchers who are so on Chinese speaking. So these are again authors of this cover-up report. Chinese speaking fee. Reply back and ask for $15,000, and you'll say the virus is all natural. $150,000, and you'll say it's from America, or $15 million, and you'll say Donald Trump made it.
Perfect.
So this is
a joke.
Yeah, well, it's a joke, but it gets to the heart of the diplomatic sensitivities around disclosure around the USAID DARPA side of all of this.
Yeah.
Which is that the official story is, there's, I guess, several competing official stories at this point, but nominally leaked from a lab in China, but it was done in collaboration with U.S. researchers funded by the U.S. government. And so there is, if you remember at the time, the first Trump administration was almost campaigning on a global Chinese-funded global compensation fund for creating COVID. It came from China. And this was that. And then you had the sort of Democrat apparatus saying that's xenophobic and, there's a knockout game being played in New York City because of people attacking Chinese people over this. And this became this question about the role of Chinese complicity in this. Now, the problem, and in my view, one of the significant blockages in getting disclosure to this point, and one of the reasons, in my view, the CIA and ODNI documents have to be so deeply redacted, and there's been so much national security interference in this issue, is because of the fact that, if you're going to blame it on Zhang Li-Shi in China, who was her collaborator? It was Ralph Barrick, it was Peter Daszak, it was the whole, they were all on U.S. government payroll, military payroll, NIH payroll, USAID payroll, and we'd been working with that lab for 15 years doing it there. But the question is if it turns out that Daszak and Barrick were basically the progenitors of this, could that cause a diplomatic kerfuffle saying that it was an American program that created COVID?
It's literally a Scooby-Doo situation where you pull the mask off and it's just America underneath the mask.
Well, that I think is the tail risk of solving the mystery.
What do you think the general, like, how does the general public even see this now? Do they have a take? I don't know. Like, one of the things about COVID, and I guess the great thing about following up on this is that the public sentiment isn't there to continue to follow up on this like the way people would like, right? Like, somebody who's following it closely understands what happened was an unbelievable betrayal of the world in a sense, and for America to be at the heart of this, that's a huge problem. But a lot of the general public has moved on and want to either pretend it didn't happen, or they're not curious enough to ask, was this something that came from a lab? Was it from bat soup? And I just, like, outside of working directly in the political sphere, I don't see a lot of curiosity around it. So I don't even know what the average person thinks about what happened.
Well, I think that because there are so many technical layers and such a large cast of characters in fields that very few people work in. I mean, you're talking about like virology and veterinary medicine.
Too hard
and,
for the average person to digest.
And you're talking about a million different government agencies and this whole thing. But I think that the public's interest would be reignited were you to find a smoking gun that easily answers the story and goes, oh, that's why I had to, lock down my kid. Oh, that's why. But the problem is, this is a long-term mystery to solve, and there's episodic updates, and I think it's going to take that level of effort over the months and years ahead to sort of get deeper and deeper towards a sort of consensus answer on it. But I do think that the opposition to investigating it has substantially gone away. What you had before was basically a block on investigating it, and while I think that sort of the curiosity level has gone down, so has the institutional opposition in a lot of respects, and so the work continues. But I do think it's a living issue because one of the things, like Elon Musk was just interviewed, I think earlier today or yesterday, about how shutting down USAID makes us more at risk about breakout pandemics. And right now, Ebola is circulating in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it's because we shut down USAID.
I had no idea that USAID had anything to do with funding the
fact that USAID may have actually created COVID is not a good look for arguing that we should fund, that USAID was doing any good with respect to Ebola response or SARS or MERS. How many other outbreaks did USAID actually cause rather than prevent when we set up these programs in the very countries where the outbreak occurred?
Is this the first time so this is the first time that I've heard that USAID was involved with COVID. Is that something that generally the public is aware of, or is this new information, or?
It has received less attention, I think, just because people hear DARPA and they go, ooh, DARPA. People hear the CIA. Oh, Ralph Baric was working at the CIA. And Fauci was such a big presence. And
anyone that knows you knows that USAID and
USAID
CIA are basically
has
the same
longest and most extensive relationship with it. It was, in that article that you pulled up when it said that Peter Daszak had a 15-year relationship with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Well, date back to 2024, 15 years. It's 2009. That was when USAID Predict was stood up. And in fact, when the outbreak first happened, Daszak and clan gave a quote to the press about, "Wow, it's incredible that that SARS-CoV-2 has a 99.6% biographic or basically biological match to the bats that we found in the horseshoe caves in Yunnan that we brought to the Wuhan Institute of Virology on a USAID grant." And that was seen as, like, USAID was bragging about that in the early parts of the pandemic to say, oh, this puts us in ready position to try to find a vaccine because serendipitously we happen to have the exact bat samples that match, this SARS-CoV-2.
How connected were they? How connected were they to the American medical companies that were trying to find a vaccine for this when we should have had a head start from the beginning?
Well, I mean, intensely. I mean, there's a very, very deep relationship between USAID, DARPA, and the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, we've had multiple secretaries of defense who straight up came straight there from. I mean, think about Donald Rumsfeld. Yeah. He was the head of Gilead before he was made Gilead, which made remdesivir during COVID. He was the chairman of the board of Gilead right before he was plucked to be the Secretary of War or Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush, and then off to the races with anthrax and all this stuff, getting all the biodefense stuff set up by that very Pentagon. And what happens is these U.S. government agencies make the markets for Pfizer and J&J and Merck and all these companies overseas. These State Department, USAID, and military programs create basically the markets for sale, distribution, ability to offload, backlogged products, and just even if a country doesn't want it, we basically use our diplomatic leverage. We use the humanitarian assistance to help them pay for Pfizer products, and we do this everywhere: Africa, Latin America, Central and Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Far East Asia. And so there's this very deep relationship between the pharmaceutical companies and the national security complex, in part because the national security complex, when they declare a pandemic or when they declare a public health initiative, they're selling the products and forcing the sale in many respects in order to be, if you want to get your IMF loan distribution so that your friggin' Zambian economy doesn't go insolvent, you have to respond to this public health thing by buying Pfizer products.
Nothing says cronyism quite like creating the problem so that you can sell them the solution. I don't even know how much I buy that. Like, you mentioned the idea of like the smoking gun, but like you said earlier, Fauci lied under oath about gain-of-function research. And if the average person doesn't comprehend how serious that is, I just think that there's a whole lot of apathy from the general public. It's very acute when it's going on, but as soon as they're out again, they're not being surrounded by people with masks that remind them of what's going on, and they're back living in the world again. That desire for change kind of goes away.
The pardon that he got is a big part of why people have this kind of, it was a big contributor to the cynicism that people feel. They're just like, look, man, it's rigged, right? Like, he clearly lied under oath about something that killed a boatload of people around the world and basically shredded our civil liberties for a year and a half. And the Biden administration just said, yeah, you're fine. And he had an instrumental role in the production of it.
But to the admin's credit, they just arrested a couple months ago his right-hand man, David Morans, who was the guy who was deleting, tricks we learned from the FOIA lady to make documents disappear after they've already been legally requested under subpoena or Freedom of Information Act. And so, there has been, I think, an earnest attempt by the Justice Department to go after
Justice Department.
Yes. I mean, the David Morans one is a big one. And, they hit him with basically obstruction, concealment, destruction of federal records, violations of the Records Act, which is something that he was bragging about. We knew about that under the Biden administration, the David Morans emails and the destruction of evidence about the cover-up. And the Justice Department did hit him with, I think, like 15 years worth of charges. And but Fauci is protected.
There is one way that Fauci can go to prison. It's not going to be for a long time, and it's not going to be for what he should go to prison for forever. Rand Paul is calling him to testify. If he refuses to testify, then they need to Steve Bannon him. And that's the only way he will go to jail.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if he, if he's like, no, I'm not going to go, and they just say, okay, we're going to get you for contempt of Congress.
I mean,
it would be
he's
cool.
deep swamp. So he's like a John Brennan. They're never going to go to jail. I think John Bolton's going to go to jail. He's never going to go to jail. So they have sets of rules that they would use on Steve Bannon that they're not going to use on Fauci. But that is a way.
But the point that I'm making is like that's not going to be satisfactory because the point is the reason people are so cynical, cynical nowadays, is because they always get away with it, right? That's essentially how everyone feels. Yep. And even if he goes to jail for a year, people are going to be like, That's not enough because, again, consider the magnitude of what happened, right? Shut the whole world down.
Yep.
Worse than that, they put him on magazine covers and
Yeah.
tried to
He
pretend
was
like
on
he was
underwear.
cool.
He was on women's underwear. Do you remember that?
I mean, well, that does suck, and it's bad that he got, he was treated as some kind
He
of.
was treated as a deity. He was put on like candles
Yeah,
that Hispanic people burn. He
Yeah,
was put
but
on them.
The point that I'm making is like he did something like the reason that everybody has felt like they don't, they can't make ends meet is largely because COVID shut the global economy down basically for a year and change. And we printed all this money because of COVID. Like he was instrumental in ruining a lot of people's lives. And by a lot of people, I mean a lot of people, not just in the US, but around the world. Like the whole world shut down. So like I understand that like, the glorification of Fauci is bad and he got treated like a rock star, it's bad. But you're not going to satisfy people that had to watch their grandparents die through a glass window by saying, "Oh, he goes to jail for a year." This is the kind of stuff that
I would be okay with him if I had the choice of nothing or jail for a year, I'd take jail for a year. Would I be satisfied? No, but I'd smile a little bit. Yeah, I'd be a little happy.
But it's not justice.
No, it's not.
But the larger justice is structural reform. I mean, if you shut down a mafia, but the mafia boss escapes to some island in a non-extradition, country, the problem is we don't want something like this to happen again, and we want to root out the structural problems that were exposed by this whole thing happening. And like, for example, there have been some very big structural changes.
Just shut down a USAID.
Shut down USAID, which arguably created this, and for example, at NIH with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, cut tens of millions of dollars of grants to do social media control around mis and disinformation, around public health threats. That was something that, was, part of the cover up was the censorship of being able to talk about it. So no one could dispute something like the Proximal Origins paper. Yep. To dispute it was to have a terms of service violation on the tech platforms, which was flagged by tens of thousands of government-funded censors. Yeah. And we've cut all that grant funding, and we've sent a very powerful message to future aspiring professional censors. This is not a good business to be in. You lose one election, and there goes all you're going to, you're going to have to get a service job in the gig economy because we are not in that business anymore. We've done structural reform to the way NIH and HHS grants work like that. And if you do that across a number of layers, I think you can get to a point where there's a general feeling of accountability. But I don't think that we're fully there yet.
Yeah, I think that. So this is part of, this kind of goes back to what we're saying about the midterms and stuff. Like people vote on, they vote on kitchen table issues. And the people that are most critical of the Trump administration, they'll say, well, he hasn't got Fauci. And again, I point to the fact that, like, look, he was pardoned by the Biden administration. And so really you're asking Trump to do something that he doesn't have the power to do. And you're blaming Trump for not having the power to do something. Like you don't want a president to come in and say, well, we're just going to send the FBI to wrap him up. Go ahead.
No, look, that's totally true. But there are other layers to this, like the one that I said about, the Chinese speaking fee sort of comedy moment, which is when the CIA stonewalls Senator Paul, when ODNI, when a government agency is not responding to requests for transparency on this, the White House could force that to happen, right? All it takes is a phone call. Hey, make public everything about COVID. Hey, you're not turning over these documents. Turn them over. There are things that could be done on this. Yeah, that are not outside.
The point that I'm making, at least as far as the midterms and more broadly. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just to complete this point. Think about what happened with Senator Paul's hearing with the CIA whistleblower on COVID. Around Fauci interference in the intelligence community. If you can pull it up, actually, if you can probably find it just through Google by saying CIA Spox, SPOX like X and then Twitter or X account like response to Rand Paul CIA whistleblower hearing.
So
Now,
this was about what specifically? When was this?
Yeah, this is Jim Erdman. This was the CIA whistleblower. There you go. Yeah, see that top one right there? So this was the CIA whistleblower who was working on, I believe, the COVID public health analyst type stuff, who basically reported about, who told the Rand Paul's committee in a public hearing about how Tony Fauci personally intervened and pressured the intelligence community to change its assessment about the lab leak, and then various elements of the intelligence community assessment about COVID were personally manipulated by Fauci and his minions. And this just happened. What was this? May 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. And so that was spearheaded by the legislative branch, Chairman Paul. But the executive branch, which is, the administration, the official response to the CIA around this hearing was to attack the legislative branch for having a public hearing.
That was the last tweet that they actually put up back in. That's the most recent tweet they put up.
Yes, but this is they did this the same day. The committee acted in bad faith by subpoenaing a CIA agency officer for testimony today without notifying CIA, despite having already obtained closed-door testimony from the individual previously. The witness testifying today is not appearing as a whistleblower in pursuit of truth, but instead in response to the subpoena issued by Chairman Paul. This proceeding amounts to nothing more than dishonest political theater masquerading as a congressional hearing, as the CIA has already assessed COVID-19 most likely originated from a lab leak, and efforts to undermine that conclusion are disingenuous. Now, this is not an honest thing to say. That nothing in that testimony challenged the conclusion about a lab leak. If anything, it supported it. It was about how Dr. Fauci and his minions personally intervened on the CIA and ODNI at the time in order to change their hypothesis about it being a lab leak. It's more evidence for the very thing that they are disingenuously claiming that it somehow undermines. Of course, it's not undermining it, but what it does is it reflects poorly on the agency about how the agency acted as a political instrument, operating at the behest of political pressure from the Fauci establishment rather than making an independent assessment of what caused COVID. But that's an executive branch agency. That is not something that is outside the control or influence of the administration. They report directly to the White House. And so the picture is complicated on that front.
I understand what you're saying, but the point that I'm making is when you're offered a binary choice, right, and your options are either Republicans, and in this particular context, your Republican representative or your Democrat representative or staying home. So you've got three options, right? If you stay home and Democrats win, then this doesn't get any better. You don't get any support.
Of course, 100% to Josie's point. Like what Josie was saying, the option about the Steve Bannon option, he declines to show up. You hit him with contempt charges. 100% of Democrats are going to back Fauci on that.
Yeah.
And you're going to have enough Republicans to get over, the threshold. You're going, like, for example, John Cornyn just is holding up the Senate nominations for ambassador of Doug Mastriano and Kerry Lake right now until the Trump administration administers the PEPFAR funds, the USAID PEPFAR money, so basically in Africa. So you have a Republican senator from Texas.
What an odd demand.
Saying that he is not going to allow Kerry Lake or Doug Mastriano, two MAGA stalwarts, to become U.S. ambassadors until the Trump administration administers USAID money for AIDS in Africa.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? I mean, look, you look at the paperwork. I mean, guys, like, you're sponsored by Gilead. He's backed by the pharmaceutical folks.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm not going to draw too many tea leaves on that, but the thing sort of speaks for itself. But it gets to, do you think that Senator Cornyn would, who's he going to side with on the contempt, the criminal contempt, issuance by Congress over Fauci? Do you think he's going to side with the pharmaceutical donors, or you think he's going to side with the
Cornyn
MAGA
doesn't
diehards?
like Trump anyways, right?
Well,
Or is he
That's
actually?
the Ken Paxton race, right?
That's the Ken
Yeah, he
Paxton
backed
race.
Ken
Yeah,
Paxton,
but
but it took a long time for POTUS to come out in support
Yeah.
of Paxton. There's a complicated relationship, I think, that exists because Trump ultimately needs all these folks to back a budget. If not, they side with the Democrats. This is how a lot of the Doge cuts were not kept by Congress.
Yep.
And then there's a question: how much political leverage does the White House want to exert? And it comes down to a log trade. At the end of the day, if they decide not to go or to abstain or to vote with Democrats, the White House can't get anything done. There's not a large enough majority of MAGA folks.
That's to my broader point, right? So after the midterms, if the Republicans were to lose the House, because they're probably going to keep the Senate, it still looks like that. But if they were to lose the House, all advances stop. The House of Representatives, like, they're going to start doing the impeach Trump. They're going to start going. They're going to start doing everything they can to
slow everything down as well.
And so, exactly. So I guess my broader point is, it's like, when you've got a bad option or a worse option, you have a binary choice. You like to say, well, we didn't, because all the stuff you listed that Trump has done in the administration, right? Like, just the USAID cuts, that's a huge thing, right? Like, all the stuff that they attempted to do with Doge, they didn't get even a majority of it, but they did make some cuts with Doge. And there's a lot of things that we've talked about here tonight that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for a Republican administration coming in, if it wasn't for Donald Trump. The fact that Fauci was given immunity or pardoned, that was probably not even by Joe Biden. It was by someone in his administration that actually, probably signed with the auto pen, or at least told him that he should, because, we don't know exactly how much Joe Biden knew from day to day what was going on. And so I understand being upset with Trump, but the way that people, characterize Trump as doing nothing, and that is just flatly wrong. And when you've got a binary choice, you're looking at a situation of, like, look, you can go with bad or you can go with worse.
I don't think, and Josie, maybe if you want to, I feel like I've been talking a lot. I'll just say one thing, and then I'll just be like,
it's a big topic.
But,
it's okay,
but I don't think that, in general, the voter mobilization issue for the Republicans is about Trump not doing enough on various things. I think it's the things that he has done in the MAGA stalwart camp versus that proactively versus the things that he's done proactively that the MAGA stalwart camp firmly disagrees with. Not apathy or the like. It's that the things that have affirmatively been done and that are good, and things that have affirmatively been done that are bad is sort of in the crosshairs. And I think that the key issue for that demographic of sort of MAGA voters in 2024 as they go into 2026 are right now shaping up to be issues around sort of is pro-Israel foreign policy side on the right versus the wokeness stuff on the left. And there's that choice that demographic is sort of faced with, where they don't like the Democrats, they don't like the woke stuff, but they also do not like a $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget and Section 219 and an Iran war and, Section 622 and the like. And so they're sort of caught in this crosshairs where they don't like this direction, but they don't like this. And there's this weird irony where the very woke faction on the left is the most hardcore anti-Israel side, which is their main gripe. So there's this weird triangle where how much where there is no option, because everything's a package deal.
Josie, is it 2004 again? Are the libertarians in a position where they're like, well, the Democrats suck and the Republicans suck, so we're just going to stay home? Because, I remember back in, 2004, 2008, everybody hated George Bush.
Mm-hmm.
Libertarians hated him.
Yes.
They didn't really like the Democrats either. I don't think that the Democrats were as offensive back then because the woke thing hadn't really kicked
It was
off.
more just liberal, like Kennedy Democrat almost.
Yeah. So do you think, being tapped into the libertarians far more than I am nowadays, like, do you think libertarians are most likely to just stay home? Or do you think that they're actually going to say, well, I really, really don't like the Israel stuff, so I'm actually going to vote with the Democrats because they're more critical of Israel. They're more Israel skeptical.
Libertarians won't vote with Democrats largely. They will either vote for their third party as like a protest vote, or they will stay home. Because what we have, when you vote Republican or Democrat right now, the way libertarians see it, you get a gay war or you get a holy war. So the choice is, which would I rather? Would I rather have the holy war that's going to lead us into the second coming and the end of the world? Or do I want the gay war, or the gay war where, they're like, we remember the last 10 years, we were being silenced. There was this censorship to a level we've never seen. The world was mentally ill. Like, everybody didn't know what gender they were. And we still have some of that, but it's like people are waking up, and we're seeing that with the main election where the Nazi didn't quite work out. So now we're going to try this guy that thinks he's a woman and is clearly not.
I love him. I love him because I want him to be put on the national stage. I want people to see what the Democrats are backing.
Now,
I hope he gets the nod.
Libertarians in Maine may vote for him just for the memes. Just for the memes. But I
want that guy to go to I want him to go to especially to the Senate, where like everybody's got their nose in the air and they think they're so special,
Yep. So that's the way that I see it. You have to decide if you want to have a gay war or a holy war, or just not vote at all and see which one you get.
Like the big L libertarians, like the Chase Oliver types, that's the gay war.
Yes.
That's they're in support of the gay war.
They're in support of the gay
on the
wars
gay side of the gay
on
war.
the gay side.
Yes.
But they'll vote for their own person. They're not going to leave. They're going to vote for the libertarian. These are the diehard libertarians. And honestly, how I see it, I'm a small L libertarian, so I'm a libertarian by just in principle. I'm not affiliated with the party, but I was doing some stuff like with them to kind of help with the crossover. So I was going somewhere with that, and I completely forgot.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, a big part of it is like because like you said, there's a lot of the stuff that's quote unquote woke feels like it's fallen by the wayside. Even though we had the Sophie Cunningham story pulled up, what I was thinking about is like those stories.
We'll talk about in the after show.
Yeah, I know, but like those stories feel like a distraction now. Like when we get into stuff about gender politics, especially in sports, it's important, but it feels like for a lot of people, it's politically distracting because the general public has made their thoughts on it fairly clear. And while these debates are still going on, it doesn't feel as expedient or as necessary as talking about what's going on perhaps in Iran, because it's affecting our gas prices, our ability to get around, your businesses suffer, everything suffers in that sense. So you really are caught between two choices that are really bad. Now, the one we were talking about that was going on during the Biden administration, that felt like it hit us more at home because it was all encompassing in your way of life, whereas one of them seems to be tied more to your pocket. I mean, you could be talking about nuclear proliferation and maybe it's the end of the world, but we've been dealing with wars in the Middle East for as long as any of us has been alive. All of that being said, the other stuff felt closer to home, but it now feels like it's more in our rear view, even though it's probably always going to be this omnipresent thing that will make a comeback after, somebody spends a term in office, things change. It doesn't really ever go away.
I remember what I was going to say. Libertarians should vote for a smaller level in the same way that the communists did, because that's how we infiltrate. Communists are not human, and that's not me. That's literally what is written into the code of our country. But it's a bottom-up approach. So if you're going to vote for a libertarian, you're going to vote for them in your school board, you're going to vote for them for your sheriff, you're going to vote for them in your select board, and those are the libertarians that are going to get into office. If you do the protest vote, they're never going to get into office, because back with Perot, when he was a spoiler, they were like, oh no, we can never have this happen again. So in the future, libertarians or any third party are going to need to have 5 polls where you get 15%, and we're going to choose those polls. So it's designed so that libertarians can never compete. And
it's very hard because you're going to have the DSA candidates down there winning the elections and getting the laws changed.
Exactly. So what are they doing when they try to get up to a higher level? They're infiltrating the Democrats.
Yeah.
So that's the way to do it. That's how you do it.
All right, we're going to go to one last story here from the New York Post. New York City attacker yelled Allahu Akbar as he randomly stabbed 2 men near Central Park, according to victim witness, says the commission. 2 men were stabbed in an unprovoked rampage on the Upper West Side near Central Park on Thursday afternoon by a deranged attacker yelling Allahu Akbar during both attacks. Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch said. Investigators were probing whether the suspect, Raul Morales, 51, was motivated by hate, though Tisch also said the initial investigation suggests that the mental health may have been a factor. Detectives are continuing to work the case and determine motive, but according to victim and witness statements, Morales yelled Allahu Akbar, meaning God is the greatest, in Arabic during both attacks, the top cop said in a statement. The NYPD is currently evaluating whether this is a potential hate crime, she wrote. Is it possible, or is it likely that nowadays, because of the internet and because of the U.S. involvement so heavily in the Middle East for the past 20 years, do you think that this kind of exclamation is like a meme? Because I do see people that are, I mean, even Donald Trump, you know, I think he said inshallah, you know, in a tweet. And the point that I'm making is, you know, I see people in that are, you know, not Muslims saying inshallah all the time on the internet because of the meme for it. You know, like it's a, you know, it's a meme.
Does the meme make it all the way to stabby stab? I don't know if the meme makes it all the way to
I think the stabby stab comes from Crazy Guy.
Yeah, well,
but
Crazy Guy's meme.
Yeah,
That's true.
but you know, it's a crazy
What's
guy.
his name? Raul Morales. He
Yeah.
doesn't really sound Indian.
No, I mean it doesn't sound.
Doesn't really sound.
You know, usually it's something
Doesn't
a little
really sound
more
Muslim.
a little more Arabic.
I do want to talk about hate crimes in general. Now, do you think hate crimes are like? Do you believe in hate crimes?
No.
Okay, good. We're all on that same page. I don't believe that a crime.
Hate crimes are thought crimes.
Yes, exactly. And I don't believe that a crime is any more heinous because of the intention of why you did it. If you murder a child because you're a psychopath, or if you murder a child because you don't like their skin, you still murdered a child. You're still it's just as heinous. So we all oppose that. Okay, just going into this, they're investigating whether it's a hate crime. I just wanted to get that on the table, that hate crimes are thought crimes.
No,
a terrorism crime.
Yeah,
Terrorism crime, that's something to look into.
Yeah, because he said Allahu Akbar, it makes me think that it would be.
It makes me think he's a Hispanic guy that's mentally ill.
Yeah.
He attacked an Asian saying that. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, you know. I mean, so that, and honestly, I don't think
it's New York, so it's whoever's in the vicinity that he's going to attack. So I don't know. It could have been targeted. I'm sure they're going to try to figure that out.
I think this is unlikely to be actually terrorism. I do think that it's kind of like a crazy dude that was just like, you know, honestly, he was, as gross it is, he was memeing, because this kind of you know, these kind of things, if you're at all on the internet, you see these kind of things all the time with people just saying things because they, you know, it's become part of the national consciousness or whatever.
Celebrities are saying inshallah.
Yeah. That's part of why I thought of it.
What does inshallah mean?
Inshallah, God willing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I would go further than Josie and say not just get rid of the concept of a hate crime, but get rid of the concept of a mental health defense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody is mentally defective, that's even worse.
Yes.
Then like definitely get them off the streets. Definitely put
Yes.
them in jail for life.
Yeah, why do they soften the crime when it's
Like you
you
should
are
spend
a
more.
crazy person?
Now
Yeah.
like, we know there's going to be recidivism, because even if you atone for this crime, you're mentally broken.
Why is that though? Like, why is it baked into our legal system to show that type of compassion?
The argument is they don't actually know what they're doing, and with the proper mental health treatment, they could reintegrate into society and be a normal person.
But unfortunately, they do the same thing with pedophiles.
Well,
We just have a little, you know,
that's
they
a-
just need to help some help.
That's a whole different topic that deserves a whole different means of punishment. And pedophilia shouldn't be treated as if it's a mental illness.
It's treated like it's a mental illness.
It should be. It's a violent assault. But when it comes to, you know, the argument of, oh, you know, these people, once they get actual, you know, the help that they need, then they can go back into society. But one of the things that you see consistently with people that are struggling with mental illness, especially if they're you know, severely mentally ill like this, you give people medication and they start taking their medication and then they feel better. And then invariably, and not all the time, of course, but very often people start thinking, I don't need this anymore because I'm okay now. The medication fixed it. Now I don't need to take my medication. They stop taking the medication, and then the condition returns because it's not something that goes away with medication. The medication treats the symptoms. It treats whatever the mental illness is. It doesn't actually fix a person that has a mental illness. It doesn't make the mental illness actually go away. It's the medication, changing the way they perceive the world. So putting people on medication and just saying, okay, go back into the world, you have to have someone that monitors them, make sure that they're taking their medication. And when you're dealing with what frequently happens is people that are homeless or drug users, like the people that are mentally ill and homeless and drug users, it's a Venn diagram that gets real close to a circle. I used to date a girl that was she was in the nursing field as a prescriber and stuff, and she dealt with a lot of people that were mentally ill, and that's what happened. It would be, they would get them into the facility, they would give them medication, the medication would work, they would feel better, and then they'd be let loose again, and then 3-4 months later, they were back because they stopped taking their medication, started using drugs again. So the idea that you can have someone that's very mentally ill and be like, okay, well, now you can go back into society. Like, that is just as bad as taking someone that's incredibly violent and saying, okay, you can go back into society. People talk about the point of, incarceration is to rehabilitate them. And that's not the point of it. The point of it is to take the people that are dangerous and can't function in society out of society. Now, it's may be a hard pill for some people to swallow. And sure, there are people that make mistakes and end up in jail because they did something dumb that they don't normally do, or they wouldn't normally do under normal conditions. But the fact of the matter is, the point of incarceration is to take dangerous people out of society and put them somewhere where they can't hurt other people. And to treat people that are mentally ill differently than you treat someone that has a recidivism for violent attacks. That's a bad policy. Whether you be a person that just can't control your temper and attacks people for no reason, or is just likely to attack someone because you're a violent person, or if you're a person that's mentally ill and the voices told you to stab that guy. For everyone else in society, it's the same. It doesn't matter why you did it. Just like we were talking about hate crimes, it doesn't matter that you did it because you don't like the way this person looks, or you don't like this person's background or whatever. You still committed a violent act, and you can't know someone else's mind. You can't know their thoughts. So the solution is you go to jail and we take you out of society.
No, you just abolish the prisons. That's what the ESA wants to do.
What do we think about reopening asylums?
I think it's a great idea. There are dangers, of course, because especially
Thanks, Reagan.
They can be abused in the same way that jail can be abused.
Well, not only that. I mean, the way that historically, the way that communist countries would get rid of people they didn't like is they would say, "Oh, he's a crazy person. Look, he's talking about these crazy ideas. Like, he's talking out against the party, and so we have to
modern day oubliette."
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, you see them doing this with COSA and the Kids Online Safety Act type thing, where they're making an argument. Basically, that kids should be banned from social media, or should have certain access restrictions, or there should be platform accountability for algorithms that have addictive content for kids. But all they mean, if you listen, like this lawsuit being led against Facebook by the state of California, I mean, Gavin Newsom's wife is basically gave the game away about why they're bringing the lawsuits, because her kids were watching Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, and but they're cloaking it as like a mental health problem. They're basically saying it's a mental health problem, if you listen to right-wing conservative aligned content, and that the platforms have to be punished for allowing basically a competitive marketplace of ideas, because the wrong ideas give kids mental health problems.
Yeah.
Their platforms aren't strong enough, so they make our platforms illegal.
One of the things that, and I do think that there should be asylums, right? I do think that when it comes to people that are, that are violent and mentally ill, they should be removed from society. They probably shouldn't go to regular prison, because then they're just going to be violent in regular prison, making regular prison even worse. But one of the things that I think is a significant concern is you'll see people on the left, if they get into positions of authority and power, they'll go after religious people. They'll say your religion is a crazy person religion. The way that you normal Christians or normal people don't think this, like, and so your religion makes you suspect. I mean, the Biden administration has already been had already been targeting religious people and
They
stuff.
were targeting Catholics.
So yeah, they would absolutely do that again. So it's a double-edged sword, and it's a very, very dangerous thing to allow the government to commit people without oversight. But at the same time, when you've got someone that is obviously dangerous, then I think it's an all right thing. But
yeah, I mean, it's even without opening asylums. I mean, just think about the nature of an insanity defense. If someone is eligible for 10 years in prison and then they tell me they're also insane, I go 20 years in prison. I don't say 5.
yeah,
Like, what's the recidivism rate for someone who's friggin' insane?
We're looking at the guy who killed Arena, who stabbed her in the neck.
yeah, he should
I mean, he can't stand trial because he's too crazy, but let's let him out of jail.
into the oubliette. All right, we're going to go to Super Chat. So why don't you smash the like button, share the show with your friends, head on over to rumble.com and become a member there, join Rumble so that way you can watch the after show, and then head on over to timcast.com and join the Discord so you can call in. But right now, we're going to go ahead and read some of your Rumble rants and Super Chats.
Do I have time to go to the bathroom?
Yeah, you do. And I mean, someone might have a question
Is it
for
the
you.
changeover?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Oh,
If
not
we
yet.
can
Just a
wait
few more
5
minutes.
minutes.
All right, 5 minutes.
Let's see. I need Mike's help. This is from Tekken something. I need Mike's help. Are we supposed to like the CIA? Are we supposed to hate the CIA? Are they a necessary evil? Should they be destroyed? I'm so confused.
I get these types of questions all the time, and I always refer to if you go on Google and you type in chess sitting with tension. I'm going to just describe broadly how I see this. Do not try to arrive at the good bad answer if you are asking this question. Let's just see things plainly for what they are and try to get past the normative thing. When this question is usually a symptom of somebody who is uncomfortable with the tension on the board. They see some good things, they see some bad things, they see some really ugly things. They want to say, is it good or is it bad, so that I can cross this off the list of something that I am concerned about, so that I can focus on something else, or I can put this to bed and there's no longer any tension in my head about what this thing is. And you will never get there. You will never get to a point where there is no tension on this issue, whether it's about intelligence collection, whether it's about covert action, whether it's about, hawks or doves in terms of, the America's role in global leadership and what we need to, it's a dirty world out there, and dirty work sometimes has to get done in order to protect ourselves, or in order to stay ahead of problems, or in order to shift the balance of power in various places or regions or industries or whatever. The attempt to label the whole thing good or bad is a attempt to relieve the tension on the board that you feel of having to juggle all these things. But if you just recognize that this is just a chessboard with a lot of pieces on it, and just try to understand the pieces and make your own judgment about any particular piece, the answer will sort of come to you any given month or any given, period of your life where you agree or disagree with what it's doing, and be guided by the reforms that you seek to make, rather than a top-down good-evil.
And this is something I mention on our show a lot. This is why the CIA propaganda arm has spent so much time in Hollywood, because they want to give the uninitiated and the people who don't have the will to look super closely into it, they want to give them a generic feeling of positivity that they're working towards U.S. interests, which generically means your interests, which is why they've been working with Hollywood to help the accuracy of their movies for decades.
But we are initiated.
Exactly.
Who asked that question?
I don't remember. Let's see. I can't even see his whole name.
Technic liar.
Technic liar, I'd say with MK Ultra, Bay of Pigs, Iranian coup, the Phoenix, the Iran Contra, the post 9/11 behavior. It's okay to not like them.
I think that I'm going to go with Thomas Sowell, where there is no right or wrong. There is only trade-offs. You get a little of what you want, and you get a little of what you don't want, and that's kind of the way that like reality in life is. So, let's see from Carlo Magno Cal. Phil needs to read articles with rock and roll enthusiasm. How's that?
Should.
A little better.
I love it.
Right. From Taylor says, the Roundup suit failed because they were being sued for something they aren't required to do, and state law can't override federal law. You don't want states making laws targeting companies they don't like. I don't know enough about the details of the suit to actually speak on that, but yeah, you got that out. HawkDude83 says, hey, Timcast, big fan, Mike. Tim, is there really a difference between hero and anti-hero? Has there ever been an anti-hero that became a hero? I always relate to the anti-hero. I mean,
I'd say Green Goblin.
Gaston
he's
from
cool.
Beauty and the Beast was an anti-hero, and I will die on that hill.
John Wick.
It depends on how far they've gone initially and what your thoughts are on for instance, the Punisher kills a lot of bad guys, but it depends on whether you think that that's justified. Are you a strong proponent of the legal system that these people go be put in front of a judge? Like Daredevil will, it's like Batman, right? He doesn't matter how many times he brings him to Arkham Asylum, they're going to get out and kill a bunch of people. There are a lot of people that are okay with him. He never does, at least not when he's in the proper timeline, making that decision, but the anti-heroes will, and so it's a matter of personal preference.
I don't know what the body count is on Deadpool or Wolverine, but either of those two, they don't have a problem with killing the bad guys.
You could say that an anti-hero can act heroically. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. If, in fact, a lot of it would end up being that they learn to make those choices as it goes on. A more interesting story is to see an anti-hero shed that skin and become a hero in the eyes of the public.
I don't know why you can't just give Batman or Superman a law enforcement badge and just deputize them to use lethal force against people who are using lethal force. Like, why don't they just
Batman won't.
It's from a storytelling perspective, it's not as interesting.
Yeah, but like then it's
Boom,
all
it's over.
authorized. It's like
Well,
a
they're
police.
protected. They're protected like the police are when they shoot people.
Also, yeah,
And he wears a body cam.
He wears-
and he can be sued in court if he uses unlawful force.
But he's got a mask on. He's got his identity concealed, so there's no way to properly prosecute him.
We do the same to the spies. They have a double identity.
All right, so like I said, smash the like button, share the show with all your friends. Mike, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Find me on X at Mike Ben Cyber. Also, same on YouTube, Instagram, Rumble, all that jazz.
Josie?
You can find me on X, TRHL Official. You can find me on YouTube at The Josie Show, _s in between the words, and Cast Brew Coffee. I have a coffee, and it is very patriotic, and I would suggest going over to castbrewcoffee.com and checking out my delicious, amazing coffee.
If you guys want to follow me, I'm on Instagram and on X at Brett Dasovic on both those platforms. You should check out PCC. We are live 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, which is, of course, noon Pacific. Tomorrow, we will be going live at 2 p.m. Eastern, celebrating episode 1,100 of the show. We celebrate every 100 episodes because it is a good thing to appreciate it when you have it. So you should join us there. Also, if you are a member of the Timcast Discord, I do shows twice a month at 7 p.m. doing small show, cover a couple of topics, hang out with you guys. I'll be there on Saturday night. I will see you there.
I'm Carter Banks. You can find me at Carter Banks on X and at Carter Banks Official on Instagram. Record label is at Trash House Records on YouTube. Got a new song up there. Y'all should go check it out. Yeah, let's get into the after show. Phil.
Don't forget, tomorrow, if you're a Timcast Discord member, you can come on down to the Cast Brew Coffee Shop in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Come hang out. I'm going to be there. Ian's going to be there. Tim's going to be there. A bunch of people will be there. I'm not sure who else is going to be
I'll
there.
be there as well.
Josie?
Coffee.
Yeah.
Ian's going to change the weather.
So come on down. I think it starts around 7. If you're a Discord member, or is it just do you have to have advanced
I think
tickets or something?
I'm not
Didn't
sure
we
what the-
sell out the tickets?
Yeah, they're sold out. They're tickets. It's a thing that Olivia Clear would know more about than I would. But
tweet at Olivia Claire. She'll help you
Yeah.
out. I'm Phil That Remains on X. I'm Phil That Remains on Patreon. The band is All That Remains. You can check us out on Apple Music, Amazon Music, Pandora, YouTube, Spotify, and Deezer. Stick around for that Rumble after show that starts now. Josie says the Jews are after her.
They are.
Her X account got locked while she was talking about Section 219.
Yep.
So.
I shit you not, I have a post of a screenshot with a timestamp on my page while I was talking about Section 219. I got locked out of my account.
I will say, so we did a video last week about clavicular in Israel, and we made a thumbnail that said Zionist chill ? And then
Just clickbait farm maxing.
And well, yes, and then also, and the thumbnail says like clavicular accused of selling out to Israel, and for some reason the video couldn't get over like 1,000 views, and worse than that, not a single comment, which I don't believe for 1 second on YouTube. I don't know what that was about. Perhaps it was just an error, but I deleted it and I re-uploaded it. It's coming out tomorrow without any of those identifiers. We'll see what happens.
We're going to see if the Jews are after you too, or if they're just after me. Phil, are the Jews after you for any reason?
I'm not particularly interested in Israel or the Jews, so because of that, the libertarians are after me.
Neither
Because I'm not,
am I,
because,
though.
Well, no. But the thing is, I'm on this show every day, and I'm not critical enough of Israel because I'm just kind of like they're 6,000 miles away, and I don't really worry about them much. So the left say that I'm a genocide, a pretendicide enabler, and the right says that I'm a Jewish shill.
If Equatorial Guinea was involved in our country, I would be opposed to them too. It doesn't matter. I'm America only. I'm opposed to everybody involved. When it was Ukraine 3 years ago, that was it was Ukraine was involved in everything, and they were bringing Zelensky onto the floor and waving the Ukraine flags around, and that was disgusting and anti-American
It
behavior.
was very gay.
Yes.
I saw that he was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize this year.
How?
I have no idea.
Have we forgotten what he did? He was shuttering churches. He was arresting American journalists, and they were dying in custody.
Yeah,
I mean, they were censoring
Coach Red
speech. They
Pill,
were
right?
conscripting people
It
to
was
fight.
Coach Red Pill, right? That passed away.
Coach Red Pill.
Yeah. So look, I don't have any particular affinity for Israel. I don't worry.
You just don't care.
I really don't. I don't worry about other wars that are going on around the world. I have my own opinions on what the situation with Iran is, and you can read about it on my Patreon. The day the strike started, I wrote a piece on what I really thought about the strikes on Iran and how what the whole geopolitical situation for that was. I don't believe that the U.S. is going to war for Israel. I don't believe that there is a genocide in Gaza, and I'm not particularly partial to the Palestinian plight because, well, I mean, there's a lot of terrorists in Gaza, or there was a lot of terrorists in Gaza. So for me, it's like I'm not really interested in either side.
Do you believe that the Iran war is a net positive?
That's yet to be seen.
You're not sure yet. Okay.
Yeah, that's yet to be seen.
What?
I think that the Iran war is a lot about China and the U.S. trying to weaken China, and whether or not that will be successful is still remains to be seen. But when you look at the U.S. actions on the Panama Canal and then Venezuela.
It's an energy. It's like a race to the moon, but it's a race for energy.
Yeah, and really it boils down to, they're, in my opinion, they're doing their best to, they don't want to actually go kinetic with China, at least right now we don't, and so they're doing their best to slow China's ability to make war and to engage in any kind of kinetic activities.
What Mike was talking about when the super chat came in about, whether you like or dislike or how you feel about the CIA is how I feel a lot about foreign policy in the absence of when you come on here and people have this deep understanding of the way things work with American foreign policy, how it relates to war. And I don't run under the idea that, just all war bad all the time, because I understand that America has to put America's own interests first. And not to say that I want war, but it's just I don't feel comfortable having that discussion or advocating for anything like that. Because, look, they're not asking me to go fight. And they never have. They never would. I was born deaf in one ear, and it would have never been able to, enter the military anyways. But I also understand that America needs to put its own interests first. So it's always one of those things where I'm never truly comfortable having those discussions, because I see a lot of people who have very nuanced nuanced perspectives on all of these things. And I'm like, look, I don't know if I'm the person that you're going to come to for an answer on this, so you should just stay out of it.
Yeah, my position is non-interventionism. I'm not an isolationist. I'm a non-interventionist. So that comes down to I don't want to do offense. I don't want to empire the world. I just want to
Securing trade routes is okay, but
that's fine. Like that's a defensive strategy. I mean, even when Thomas Jefferson, the Barbary Pirates, and that was because they were attacking sailors. So that wasn't offensive. That was him.
They were
defending.
enslaving Americans.
Yes, they would. Yeah, exactly. And Thomas Jefferson, who is he is as libertarian as they come, was like, well, I gotta get in there and defend the sailors.
As far as presidents, yeah, he probably
Yeah,
was.
he was very. I mean, there was Calvin Coolidge, who obviously was the most libertarian
Simon
of all.
Cowell,
But when it comes to the founding fathers, the most libertarian would have been Thomas Jefferson by a long shot. Yeah,
All right, let's talk about chicks with dicks.
chicks with dicks.
Sophie Cunningham says it's common sense to keep trans athletes out of women's sports. Indianapolis, Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham doubled down Wednesday on comments she made in a recently published ESPN article saying it's common sense to bar transgender athletes from competing in women's sports. In the ESPN article, Cunningham said she wanted to protect young girls in the locker room and that they shouldn't have to go against biological men. I said what I said. I think it's very kind of common sense, Cunningham said before Indiana's 123-88 victory over the Connecticut Sun on Wednesday. And I
like
think
the
I'll always
inclusion of that
believe it.
part.
What was that?
I like the inclusion of that.
Yeah, you
They
know,
routed him.
Brittany Griner, I think she plays for Connecticut still, and so she probably smoked too much weed before the show or before the game. I think I'll always believe that. I think it's really important to protect children, and that's little girls who are also involved in that category. I stand on what I said. The participation of transgender athletes in sports has become an increasingly politicized issue, with the Supreme Court recently upholding individual state bans on trans athletes competing in sports alongside cisgender athletes. Just the fact that they use the term cisgender, I'm not particularly.
Cis is a
fond of.
slur.
I don't think of it like a slur, but I think they should just say normal.
No. I'll tell you why it's a slur. So it is a slur. It is used to marginalize normal people. And they say, no, it's not a slur. It's a prefix, is what they'll say. It's not a slur. It's a prefix. And to that, I respond, okay, homo.
The best thing they can do in these situations is to not turn her into like a right-wing spokesperson. We need more people, because she's
Very Riley Gaines.
She says, I'm not political for the most part. She cares about this issue, and she does more good for the issue by caring about this one and not having to do like ads for Patriot Dirt or something like that. Like as soon as you become like a spokesman or a figure for a political cause, then you're dismissed out of hand by people who are, first of all, those who are already extremely politically radicalized, but even the ones who are not will look at the fact that you're now some type of avatar for an entire political movement, and they can dismiss your thoughts out of hand. I think that she's more powerful having this issue that she'll speak on when it comes up, but otherwise she stays out of it because it doesn't matter to her.
I think it mattered. This is such an important issue to me. I am a mother of girl athletes that are playing or going to play at a pretty high level. So I was living in Massachusetts, and there was co-ed soccer, and I have it on video because that was my only choice. My daughter's like, I want to play. And I'm like, you're going to play with boys? And she's like, well, I want to play. In 7th grade, she's playing soccer against a boy, and I have it on film, and he just bodies her. And my daughter is tiny. She's a tiny little thing. And this is like bigger than you. Yep. Yeah. So this is a big kid who does that. And I'm like, I can't have her play soccer anymore. And that's her dream. She wants to play soccer, professionally. So one of the reasons that I moved from Massachusetts to Florida was to protect my kids. And that's illegal. You can't do that in Florida. They tried, but you can't do that. So my daughter's able to excel. She's all county, and she's offensive player of the year, and she's MVP, and she's excellent, and she's got 2 SEC schools looking at her, and she just visited Stetson, So when it comes to boys and girls sports, I say get out of my daughter, get the fuck out of my daughter's sport. That's what I say as a mother.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that everyone, at least everyone here at Timcast, generally is of the opinion that trans women, dudes, shouldn't be playing in girls' sports. I think especially when it comes to kids, but I think just overall.
There have been as of last year, the count was over 900 accolades taken from girls and
Yeah.
given to boys. And that includes scholarships, that includes trophies, that includes titles.
I mean,
all
look,
taken away.
I'm all for taking things from women, but
That's fair. We don't deserve much.
I think the nonchalantness of this is really important. Like, I think the fact that she didn't feel like she had to turn it into more than it was, she didn't try to stand on a bunch of other ideas. She's simply stating it as, Phil, you were saying something the other day about when people bring up voter ID and they try to like join them on the playing field they're on, you're just giving them leverage by even entertaining the discussion. Don't entertain the discussion. Like, this is stupid, I disagree, and then move on.
When someone calls me a racist, I just say, fuck off, right? Or someone says that I'm a bigot, or someone says that I'm whatever, I'm just fuck off.
Anytime somebody says something like that to me, I say, thanks, I learned everything I know from your mom. And it seems to really hit hard.
Your mom jokes are always good. But the point is, like, if you engage with people that make arguments like that, you're giving their argument credibility by saying, this is something I need to defend myself from. You're a reasonable person and you're making a reasonable argument, so I have to defend myself from it. If you just say, shut up, that's bullshit, or fuck off, or whatever, then you're dismissing them out of hand and you're not giving them the respect to engage in the argument. And so, like, we were sitting here, it was Libby and someone else, and they were talking about the argument being made, and they were like, oh, it was the voter ID thing. They were like, oh, look how ridiculous it is, and it was bordering on the Democrats are the real racists, and I hate that. But like they were like, well, of course black people can get IDs and women and I'm like, guys, they know it's bullshit. So engaging in the argument that they want to make is giving them something. Give them nothing. Tell them to fuck off.
Shut it down in a way where you just laugh at them. Laugh.
Yeah.
It discredits them. It makes them embarrassed.
Okay, clown shoes. But all right, we're going to go to your calls right now, to the people in the Discord. I never have a problem with Discord except for when I'm sitting here behind Tim's computer. Let's see. Who do we got?
Every night.
Ragda. What's up, man?
What up, dude?
Oh, Alex, right?
Yeah, Alex.
Okay. How you doing?
Doing well, guys. How about you?
Doing well. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you as well. Thanks for taking my call. Resident Serb here once again. I got a question for Mike, actually. I'm going to start with the question first of all. Yeah, let's go directly.
He's leaving.
Hold on a second.
Mike just got a little autistic.
Oh, I don't know if
Mike wants to look at the sword.
Well, I guess you can on the after show.
This, you can have that on the after show. I can pull out my Glock.
Mike just found a sword.
Do it.
So, all right, Mike, he's got a question for you.
Ready.
Hello. Hi, Mike. I guess, let me just go with the question directly. So, recently there's been a lot of geopolitical changes, and I'm curious. First of all, how do China and Russia actually project soft power abroad? Which other major powers still matter globally? And are the big players mostly locked in rivalry, kind of like a two-block thing, or are there, real alliances still these days? And how have those relationships changed recently?
Great questions. So, how Russia and China exert soft power are slightly different. China, I think, is much more sophisticated. Russia's primary means of soft power is through financial entanglements between Russian oligarchs and comparable oligarchs in partnered countries. So, for example, one of the ways that the Cold War reignited in the early 2000s was through European dependence on Russian oil and gas, which allowed Russia to reassert soft power influence over countries, be they Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, the Balkan countries and the like, because the transit revenue from the natural gas being sourced in Russia made a lot of people in those countries rich. And because of Russian oil exports, it makes a lot of people rich in foreign countries that are effectively importing Russian oil or whose businesses depend on that Russian oil. And so we call that financial or economic soft power projection. It's a very different, now we use that as well, economic soft power, in myriad ways, but that is, I would argue, Russia's primary means of doing it at a impactful level, which is to say that capturing a foreign country's oligarchs by effectively getting them on direct or indirect payroll makes powerful figures in that country economically entangled, dependent, and supportive of pro-Russian narratives, interests, the like. We incorporate that, but we also incorporate a much more expansive informational soft power, institutional soft power, human soft power networks on the ground. We go after the labor unions, the media organizations, the public health ecosystems, the education systems, the court systems, rule of law, the legislative, the executive, the judicial branches of the government, the full spectrum. And that is because we've invested a lot more in that institution building, whereas Russia does not have very robust institution building. They don't have huge networks of NGOs, nonprofit organizations, think tanks that do, for example, exchanges. Now, China is much more sophisticated in that way than Russia. China has a version light, I would say, of what we have. They primarily, the way China really captures a country, if you take a look at like Africa, for example, through debt trap diplomacy or through financial entanglements that are not necessarily about building a powerful oligarch who's got a lot of clout, for example, in Romania or Bulgaria. But what they will do is basically build roads, ports, and then take
infrastructure.
Infrastructure and the like. And now that's something that we do as well, but China has focused on that. And in particular, because they don't have to spend as much on hard power, they don't have 800 military bases, and they've also not incurred, because they're soft power, they do what, I call value-based diplomacy as opposed to values-based diplomacy. We will do that sort of thing, but we will make it a quid pro quo that in addition to us getting an equity interest in some port or us having some easement to some land with minerals or the like, or some trade deal being struck, we will also impose various soft power conditions like you have to reverse your ban on gay marriage. You have to allow...
That's this law.
Right. And so we use values-based diplomacy nominally as a soft power exertion because it tilts the hearts and minds, at least in theory, towards a sort of Western orbit and off of a sort of, Russian, Chinese heteronormative, etc. We fold values into it, but that also causes a lot of resentment. Whereas when the Chinese go in, they will have this economic soft power, but since they don't force a structural, cultural sort of heritage reorganization of the country's values, it's a raw value play. And we find ourselves in China sort of outgunned diplomatically, frankly. I remember when I got to the State Department, and one of my roles was chairing basically the U.S. government position on the International Telecommunications Union, and being briefed by my deputy that we were only fighting for parity with China and to sort of neutralize Chinese initiatives there because we didn't have really the votes to take an aggressive posture because all 54 countries in the African Union were siding with the Chinese delegation on this, and that there was... Yep. And so I guess that was the first part of your question, is the differences. That your second question was about the great power competition aspect, or?
How has this changed recently? Because I've noticed recently in Europe especially, there's been a lot of changes in how everybody's positioning themselves in relation to different powers globally. So kind of ties into the last part of I wanted to add this as well, just to tie it into this. So do you think at this point Europe is actually an independent actor at any level? Which countries would be independent? And are there any, or are all countries in Europe at this point basically just influenced by Russia, China, or America, or maybe Middle East?
Yeah, I've heard people sort of banty about that framework about sovereign versus non-sovereign, independent versus non-independent countries. I don't find that to be a particularly useful framing. I mean, I would argue it's hard not to see the United States. I mean, who's independent in the United States? I don't know that countries really make decisions because it's in their national interests. I think that the politically appointed representatives deal with a diverse set of interests between voters and donors, and often represent the interests of donors over voters. And what you have is basically a stakeholder soup to which politicians are dependent on, even in nominally independent countries. And oftentimes that involves foreign actors as well, or oligarchs, that provide a institutional or amplification or financial support base and the like. But certainly the EU, because of hostilities with the Trump administration under Term 1 and Term 2, is trying to pivot off of the U.S. alliance in certain core respects, not the least of which there's digital strategic autonomy initiative around their tech stack. And this is where, it gets...
Yeah, they're trying something.
Yeah, the blue sky, the Euro sky plot, the digital regulation around the Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act. There is... the Russia-China relationship is right now being reshaped because of the energy dynamics. Whereas Russia used to export all of its gas to Europe, because of the U.S.-led sanctions in 2014, combined with the EU, heavy adoption of that and the support for the war against Russia and the blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines and the like. Russia is constructing natural gas to sell to China instead, and these gas pipelines are 30-year marriages. And so China gets the benefit of extremely cheap, basically discounted gas that used to be cheap gas for Europe. And so I think that you've seen, a kind of, I don't want to say new Sino-Soviet alliance, but the war on Russia has basically made, I think, Russia and China closer. They still have a lot of differences, distinctions in their own conflicts. But certainly, I think just out of economic necessity, especially with the secondary sanctions and the like that have been popping up, China is increasingly a customer of Russia, which creates its own oligarch to oligarch relationships. Whereas China also has a lot more international latitude, and so I can see the EU pivoting to China, Canada pivoting to China, a lot of NATO partners pivoting to China. Rather than the U.S., and that's one of the sensitivities diplomatically in terms of our crackdown. How far can you push Europe before they turn to China?
Yeah. That's kind of what I noticed as well. I mean, China has been gaining a lot of influence, not only in Serbia. Serbia has been Chinese for kind of a long time now.
But
I'm not sure what we are at this point. It's kind of a confusing situation. First of all, I just want to thank you for the analysis of the bringing down a dictator. I think I watched it about 4 times so far. But I have to tell you one interesting thing. Follow up on the people there. People from the documentary that you'd mentioned. The 2 faces there are still active.
Oh yes, of course, Canvas and the yes.
The other one is, I think, Center for Nonviolent Conflict.
Oh yeah,
something.
No, they're hugely involved in all of our street protest, AstroTurf work, our Rent a Riot work.
That's the thing. I'm kind of confused now. So because Serbia is now in an interesting position, we're kind of in between China, America, and Russia. We're trying to divest from Russian oil. America's forcing us to do that.
Yes.
We're getting a lot of deals for data centers and for other things from America at the same time. Trump likes us so far, as far as I can see. And China still invests money, but I'm not sure what's happening.
Right. Well, I mean, think about the Hungary situation. Like, since we were just talking about the great power sort of play there, Hungary turned to China in primary part because of the EU and Democrat, sort of pressure and sort of neocon pressure on the Orban government. And so China was, whereas China represents kind of a counterpart, trading partner for the EU, against the United States, countries like Hungary turned to China because their funds, they had 38 billion locked up in the EU and various pressures being put on them from the U.S. government and USAID. And so China really is a very flexible swing player that way. And, they are good in the business of, think about even the state of California. I mean, China is in many respects bailing out many parts of the California state budget. San Francisco solved its homeless problem in one weekend when the Chinese economic delegation came because of that interplay. I think they see that as an opportunity to get their own sort of interests represented and get access to, various ports and infrastructure and, soft power nodes.
Yeah, but that's the thing. In Serbia, I'm not sure right now what's going on because our protesters who are protesting the government are pro-EU, actually, I don't know even if they're pro-EU at this point. I think Russia's been increasing their soft power influence technically in China. I don't know if it's noticeable yet, but I don't know, just something I'm noticing. They've started doing something like Eurovision alternative.
Yeah.
They started that thing. They started investing in universities here in Serbia, and China has also been doing that. And in Serbia, an interesting thing is happening. We're kind of desecularizing our university, at least one of them.
I have a little bit of context that I can add to this particular conversation about Russia. So just recently, my band got an extremely generous offer to go play shows in Russia. We're not going because I'm not.
Don't be surprised.
I'm not going to Russia as long as.
Worried about getting trapped there.
Well, I mean, I'm not so much worried about getting trapped. I'm not going there to Moscow and St. Petersburg as long as Ukraine is shooting, flying drones into, places in what's it called. But we've been there before. It's been a while. I think the last time we went was 2012.
Well, that was during the Russian reset.
Yeah. And I think it was 2012. Maybe it was 2011.
Yeah, 2010, 2012. That was when we had a détente. That was when Russia was the good guy for a minute there.
And this offer is significantly bigger. I'm not going to talk about how much it is, but it's significantly bigger. And they're talking about paying for hotels, paying for flights, which normally you get an offer and that's what it is, and you have to get there and pay for everything. But they're talking about everything's included. They'll pay for all of it, and we get a big, big check. And there's a friend of mine's band I believe they're currently over there, or they're going over there shortly. And I imagine the offer was substantial, just like ours. So I think that you're probably. This probably aligns with what you're talking about soft power, Russia trying to reach out and do soft power stuff.
I've now done 16 hours of subscriber content on the CIA and the music industry and how we do the exact same thing with these international concerts and especially in the music industry and the intelligence world. I'll put clips of it on my main timeline. But I love this subject so much.
People accuse me of being a Fed because I'm in a metal band that tours. Like they're like, oh, you're a Fed. You're the CIA started rock stars and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, look, I mean, just because the CIA had a hand in this kind of stuff doesn't mean that every band that ever goes on tour is actually a Fed.
Remember when Bono played in the tunnels of Ukraine, played underground for Ukraine, and we're supposed to think that's not propaganda to get us to support the war?
I ain't going to Ukraine either as long as there's a war going on. When the war ends and there's a real armistice or something where they're not shooting at each other, then we'll talk about going to those parts of Europe and
Russia. The other
Russia.
issue, around the Russia thing is having that on your passport at this moment when the Democrats
not very good.
That's an immediate counterintelligence threat in the eyes of Southern District of New York and the entrenched sort of FBI careers where the moment power snaps back the other way. I mean, they went after Trump. They investigated Trump for his real estate dealings in Russia in the 1980s.
Yeah.
When he ran, when he was the president in 2017.
And not only that, they're like, I know our European booking agent said, look, if you go do this, there are other booking agents and festivals that will not book you.
Oh, exactly.
Blah, blah, blah.
Actually, I know the exact associations
by
that would.
association.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but anyways, do you have anything you want to add?
Nothing too special. Just wanted to shout out the Discord. Forgot the first 2 times, but gotta say, even though I'm Serbian, really great place to meet people. Thank you guys for everything. And Phil, one thing.
Yes.
I noticed you're really anti-communist, so if you ever need somebody to teach you about communism or how much to hate it, I'm your guy.
Bro, do you have an X account?
I have an X account. I'm not very active. I mostly just troll.
Do you follow me?
Yep.
Tweet at me or reply to the top tweet that I have now, and I'll make sure that I follow you.
Thanks, bro.
My top tweet right now is I said literal imbeciles about some people that are saying something stupid. So just be like, hey, I called into the after show and I'll follow you. And all right.
Okay, I'm just commenting. It's me. Yeah.
Awesome. All right,
Thanks.
man. Thanks.
Calling, dude.
Oh,
Take care,
you need a bromance.
I mean, I love an anti-communist. So let's see. Come on there. Angry fat white guy. He's still muted because the Discord is slow. Angry fat white guy, what's up, man?
What up?
Paul, I'm going to lead off today with an apology. I'm 3 whiskeys in, and this is a topic with which I'm very familiar. But I'm going to come after Mike Benz. I'm going to try and be professional, nice, and polite. But what I want to talk about is Section 219 of the NDAA. Man, there's a lot of misinformation. I hate using that word, but there's a lot of misinformation on social media talking about, it's giving up sovereignty and it's merging our militaries. And that's complete and utter horseshit. I don't know much about you. I just looked you up today. I apologize for that.
You're off to a very bad start.
I understand you did a brief stint at the State Department. You did some speech writing, but I don't see any experience in the military or foreign military sales or security assistance. That happens to be, my life. Section 219 does not merge our military with Israel. It doesn't give them anything.
I think that I explicitly stated it didn't.
Yeah,
When did I say it's a full merger of the militaries? You didn't even watch the show, dude.
So I'm not directly quoting you. It's the general gist and sentiment, but you seem opposed to it, right? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Okay. Let me tell you why you should. All right. So it does very few things. It requires the Secretary of War to appoint an executive agent. And by the way,
dude, did you watch the show? I already laid this out. The executive agent, department-wide, went through the whole thing. Teach me something I don't know. How about that?
Okay.
Mr. Expert.
So what it does do, it gives Israel nothing, but it gives us access to Iron Dome, Iron Beam, and David's Sling, and some other tech that the Israelis have that we don't. And it gives us the opportunity to produce these systems domestically, which gives us control of the supply line and lets us, augment American industry, right? There are a lot of things that Israel has advances in that we don't, like anti-tunneling technology, which
I already covered this.
Counter UAS.
I've covered everything you've said so far.
And cyber.
I've covered everything you've said so far. My key issue was around the interoperability and path dependency problem. Solve that one for me.
Okay, what's your problem with interoperability? Because interoperability is one of the things I do.
Did you watch the show before you said all this? Because so far you've said like 12 things wrong.
I did watch the show.
So
for the last
you heard me mention the interoperability problem, right? So you should remember it, right?
No, I don't recall specifically your words on interoperability. Okay. But what is your interoperability? Like refresh my memory. And I'm not trying to be antagonistic here.
Right. So I see the interoperability and path dependency problems as being interrelated. What you're doing is you're building it into our supply chain. You're building basically foreign military industrial complex sourced technology, military tools, weapons systems into our dependencies for deploying and operationalizing our military tech stack. This allows someone else in the chain besides our own sovereign government to have input and influence over our ability to actually use our own weapon systems. I gave the analogy, if you recall, around Anthropic and the difficulty that the Pentagon currently has around revamping our AI, because over basically 3 years of the Biden administration, you had Anthropic as the lead AI system, and given the conflicts between Anthropic and the Trump administration, the Pentagon cannot quickly or easily or cheaply revamp its AI systems. It can't get Anthropic out because it's had several years of deep entrenchment within all of our systems. There is an interoperability problem that has caused, so we can't just go with another contractor and just quickly shift everything without major, expensive, difficult overhauls of the whole thing. And in addition, what that allows Anthropic to do is make various decisions because we're reliant on its tech stack. It has a vote in our ability to operationalize those systems. And now I actually think, and this happened, for example, with our autonomous kill drones, right? Anthropic said it does not want, it basically said that the Pentagon cannot use Claude systems to be able to autonomously kill people, with Claude just making the kill decision. They want a human in the chain. Now, I actually thought that was a good thing. I don't like the idea of AI determining whether or not someone should live or die. I do think there should be a human in the chain. But in that case, the Pentagon wanted the autonomous kill system, and Anthropic held it up and said, no, we're just not going to let you do that. We're not going to allow Claude to be used that way. And there was a big court dispute, and there was a big contract dispute. What happens when it's a foreign government that gets the ability to make that decision about intelligence, about targeting, about huge underlying missile defense systems? Then when you are in negotiations with that country or with another country, but that other foreign country has a say in it or wants to intervene, they can threaten all sorts of cooperation like in that, because you are...
I see your reservations. They are not a factor. This is a path that's already been traveled. For example,
I already covered how those dependencies already exist in many respects because of so much of Israeli tech that's already built into Pentagons.
Not with military systems. Are you familiar with NASAMS? It's a joint U.S.-Norwegian missile defense system, air defense system, right? It's actually what protects our capital. We have procedural controls and like policy controls in place. We have technological controls in place. Which one of them being, for example, the risk management framework. It's open source, you can look it up. We do a lot of due diligence, and we have technological controls in place. So in terms of risk management framework, it's a whole bunch of monumental list of all these controls, whether technological or procedure or physical security.
Yeah, dude, we have this with a ton of countries.
When there's a cross domain.
We have this with a ton of countries with one-off projects. What we don't have, and what we've never had before, is a mandatory full sweep that forces it at basically every level, and that is this broad and sweeping. We don't do.
And DoD CIO and DSCA have these, and the NSA have these policies and procedures and restrictions in place specifically to protect against any kind of cross-domain intrusion.
So are you telling me that there's an executive agent who has full Pentagon integration command to make sure that all of our whole tech stack from R&D all the way up into operations is done jointly with Norway? Is that what you're saying?
No, not for Norway. We have one that does it for everyone, but not a singular agent. That's what this bill would do for cases of collaboration with Israel.
This is an agent representing effectively a mandatory integration with a foreign country. We don't have that relationship with any foreign country. We do joint development or joint intelligence or joint military activity with all of our allies virtually. We don't have anything like this with anyone. We never have. And what I'm saying is in the beginning, it will look relatively benign in the sense that you are, nominally helping each other by joining forces and having this kind of fusion at the development and then integration level. But what you don't, that creates a lobby unto itself, and it creates dependencies. And in the first couple months, it will all look very normal in terms of just an expanded version of what we do one-off with other countries. But over the course of years, this becomes whole weapon systems, whole defense systems, whole R&D chains, whole AI systems that are inseparable from each other. And that creates a huge problem if, say, you don't want to do that anymore, or you want to go in a different direction. Now, also, this other partner has something over you in any negotiation because you are dependent on them for that. And that is something that is one thing when you're doing it with NIH grants. It's another thing when you're doing it with your military.
Angry.
I think you misunderstand how it's going to develop. So if we're doing co-development, two things. It allows us to for David Sling,
angry fat
the
guy.
The ability to produce it.
Angry fat guy.
Yeah.
We got to wrap this up, though. I appreciate you calling. You got anything you want to shout out?
Yeah, Phil, why don't you follow me back on Twitter? It hurts, man. It hurts.
I got it.
Angry fat white guy, white spelled YT.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for taking my call. I would love to talk to you more. Maybe I'll hit you up on Twitter, Mr. Benz. Appreciate
All right,
you
man.
calling.
Thanks for calling. All right. We got Fujin. Fujin, what's up?
What up, dude?
Hey. Yeah. So, how's everybody doing, by the way?
Doing well, man. Thanks for calling in.
How are you?
Yeah, doing well. Not bad. That was very lively of a conversation.
Actually, I want to say one thing further to that. What would be the Israeli response if we did the exact same thing, but you swapped out Israel with Saudi Arabia?
Qatar is the...
Or Qatar.
Yeah, that's the
If
demon.
this is such a... No, but even Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
Even Saudi Arabia. If this bill was with another country, what do you think the Israeli response would be? Oh, my God. This is your... You don't think they would oppose that?
There was a meltdown when Qatar gave a country a plane. A meltdown, and it was because of the safety, and I agree with that. It was because they're worried that there could be tech in there that could track our president and spy on personal, confident conversations that he might have in the plane. And I understand that, and so this isn't different. This isn't different.
He's not here to litigate, so I don't want to.
So what's on? What's up, Fujin?
Oh no, did we lose Fujin?
He muted. There you go.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
I'm here. I was letting angry fat white guy get his piece in there. But yeah. Anyways, I agree. I mean, I work in that industry, so I understand that Israel they're very good at technology, and I'll leave it at that. I work with a lot of their software and things of that nature. It can be very invasive. We don't know exactly what it does in our systems. So, the U.S. government is very careful about how they handle it, but, sometimes they're asleep, and that can be a problem. But
Congress deserves to be able to, they have a duty to vote on this every time in appropriations, every time it comes up, and they're kind of stripping any future ability to vote on this and decide maybe we don't want it this.
Hey, Fujin, we got a bit of a cap tonight. So what's your question?
Yeah. So my question is around. My question is for Mike Benz. You recently did like an interview on some podcasts or whatever the case was, and you were. I didn't quite understand your position when you were referring to Mike Milley. Having a sort of a military strategy or policy or something to that extent. And Mike Milley was mentioning that, and that's
Mark
policy.
Milley. You're talking about the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, Mark Milley.
Yes,
right?
Exactly, the SecDef. He was saying during the Biden era that, we should be pushing, riots and things of that nature in countries when there are foreign adversaries that are potentially getting involved, and potentially things that become threatening to the United States, or things that can potentially hurt the U.S. Right? So I wanted to hear your perspective from the conversation. Aside from that comment that you made, you went into an example about China and how China had, there was a military member that saw a sign in West Africa that showed how China was trying to get involved with West Africa, and how they could potentially build a port, and how that was a bad thing for us to intervene with the government due to the economic factors that we were involved with West Africa, and we halted their.
I'm familiar with it, but what's your question about it?
Yeah. So particularly, is that an issue for you, that if the United States is using that type of soft power to try to intervene when China is trying to, build ports in these countries to expand their power and their reach?
The primary reason that I brought up this anecdote, which, just to recap for folks, involved basically the 2021 Special Forces Prospectus put out with guidance for the vision of Special Forces operations. And what it involved was instigating a race riot between Africans and Chinese in order to block a hypothetical port infrastructure deal that a West African country with access to the Atlantic Ocean would be doing with the government of China if State Department private diplomacy failed. How could you destabilize the country internally in order to give more leverage to the State Department to convince the African country to block the Chinese deal? And what this involved was an information warfare campaign to inflame racial grievances between African workers and Chinese business owners, and then to bring in USAID to give job fairs to the striking workers so that they would be economically motivated to go on strike against Chinese companies, because they would be paid by U.S. tax dollars via USAID rather than by their Chinese employers. And that is basically a special forces military operation conducted over multiple theaters, social media, labor unions, political back channeling, international media campaigns and the like, in order to bring about a political outcome that's not achievable by the State Department alone. The reason that I brought that up was not to make a moral good or bad argument about the use of dirty work by the special forces to counter Chinese influence. The reason I brought that up primarily was about USAID. USAID, in that case, is not what you will see on usaspending.gov about that grant, is that we are providing economic opportunity in West Africa to impoverished, workers, or we're doing some, business development. We're doing, sort of support for local labor unions because of some, global universalist humanitarian principle, some pie in the sky, high-minded principle about, helping poor people in a foreign country. And what you don't actually see is that it's actually a special forces operation where we just need to give tens of thousands of riotous people money to go on the streets and destabilize the country's internal affairs. The main reason I was bringing that up was about USAID as a CIA military intelligence front, and that you simply never see that in USAID public-facing documents. And so that was not about, how hawkish or dovish we should be about Chinese influence. It was basically a thrust around what USAID actually is.
Okay, so then my follow-up question to that is, how should it be handled if it's not being done by USAID? Which, by the way, I detest USAID, right? But the question is, I agree with the outcome and with the I'm an American citizen. I would like to see these type of things happen because I don't want to see the American hegemony be dismantled, particularly by the CCP, right?
Yeah.
So what would be the alternative route to that if it's not being done, if it's not being conducted in the way that it was being done, under Bentley.
Well, this gets to a larger question about just how dirty work should be. And one of the problems is when you have the Pentagon in the business of racial rent-a-riots, the deliberate stoking of racially motivated street protests, that in the era of social media and international solidarity movements has a lot of spillover impact into U.S. domestic affairs and the solidarity networks that exist here. And in that West African example, there may not be that much spillover when you're inflaming a race war between the Africans and Chinese. But what happens, and by the way, it might, but who knows? But what happens, for example, when you're doing that in Eastern Europe? What happens when you're doing that in Brazil? What happens when you're doing that? This is a big thing. For example, USAID gave just tens of millions of dollars to Afro-Brazilians ahead of the Lula election because the black Brazilian population voted disproportionately Lula. So we capacity built, and we're doing the same thing in Cuba, by the way. I hate communist governments. I don't like the Cuban government. I think they suck. At the same time, when I look at something like the USAID and National Endowment for Democracy planning documents to inflame racial tensions between the Afro-Cubans and the sort of white Cuban population, angering up grievances against the around underrepresentation at the higher levels of the Cuban government, I think, gee, you don't think that's going to have any spillover effect in Miami, in Tampa, in the U.S. in terms of those you're going to have all sorts of U.S. domestic politic interchange. I mean, we see, for example, Secretary Rubio talking about the interchange of ideas between Cubans and Americans, and this, when you have these kind of global news stories around racial conflict, we have these same racial groups in the United States. And when this is being done as covert action, when this is being done as a classified, you're not even allowed to know as a U.S. citizen, it's illegal for them to even tell you that they're stoking race wars. And then you look at these same figures who happen to play very weird roles in racial conflicts here in the United States. For example, the BLM destabilization in the summer of 2020 and the actions of Mark Milley there. Mark Milley was basically opposed to the president in his handling of the BLM riots. He was Trump's chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And you look at, the sort of military reticence to try to diffuse those or invoke the Insurrection Act in order to actually have enough boots on the ground to deal with those riots. I don't like the Pentagon being in the business of deliberately and methodically stoking race riots. I think that if you have to use covert action to do that, it has got to be something. You got to be avoiding World War III. This has got to be you better be stopping a nuclear bomb. If it's a port deal, there's, get the Treasury involved. How about that? How about threaten 400% tariffs? This sort of work, even though it might be cheaper, even though it might be expedient, even though it might bring about an immediate turn of events, in the country, is a dangerous black arts thing to dabble in. But frankly, I wasn't even raising that for that purpose. I was mostly raising it just to help illustrate what a USA jobs fair is. You think if the Special Forces is proposing that in West Africa, you don't think they're proposing that in East Africa? You don't think they're proposing that in Colombia? You don't think that's what a USA jobs fair in Pakistan is really doing? That was really the reason I was bringing it up.
Okay. Yeah. So it's mainly second and third order effects that you're concerned about.
And they bring that home. If you look at what those people's next jobs are after they leave the Pentagon, they will, it is so frequent. And this is what we saw. Basically, this whole professional class that is trained in stoking these kinds of riots at USAID, at State, at Pentagon, at CIA, came home and formed the 2017 resistance. And then, we're involved in everything from BLM to the pussy hat marches, to everything. And when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you create a professional class of people who do that, they get their next jobs domestically and bring that here. And then the thing that you were doing as black arts to stop a port deal in China suddenly becomes black arts that you're using in Chicago or L.A., or Baltimore, and in order to stop authoritarianism at home.
Yeah. You have anything you want to add?
No, that's it. These are very communist tactics.
Yep.
So I agree with you, and I appreciate it. Nope. The only thing I want to add is, Phil, I see that you're not very good at dabbling in the AI space. I was a former AI engineer, so if you have any you have any inquiries about it or anything like that,
There's
got to
be some kind of running joke with people mogging Phil for stuff that he's good at doing.
I'm not an expert at AI. I'm just probably the one of the more experienced people here. Not even the most experienced, but I appreciate the offer.
Well, if you want to build a platform or you want to build like automated marketing campaigns through AI, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks for the call, Fujin.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Got one more.
All right. What do we got?
60 seconds.
Sir Jackoff.
Sir Jackoff.
Once the Discord catches up.
Is he still alive?
Hey, Sir Jackoff. What's up?
Dude?
Man, I hope they're still breathing because I kind of want to loop them in a little bit into my question. And Mike, I know you're new around here, but it's supposed to be the Discord members who talk too long, not you. I'm just kidding. It's a gift on us, not you. Anyways, straight to the questions because I know we're short on time. Is there any room or maybe will there be a path in the future for forgiveness on the right, but just in the political sphere in general? This question was slightly inspired by everybody's other favorite subject besides the Jews, but Lauren Southern's drama and all that. I know that we all fall short in the glory of God. So there's something to be said about someone who's willing to be open about their mistakes and genuinely seeking forgiveness. Trump and Elon aren't the shiniest characters either, but yet we welcome them in this fight. And is there such thing as finding honest actors and bringing them back into the fold?
Why don't we get Josie in this? I feel like you've got a take on this.
So was your question specifically about Lauren or people like Lauren?
No, not just Lauren, but just using her as an example. She's been very open about things that she's done. Who knows if she's completely honest about everything? I don't know all the details, to be honest. I'm just using her as an example. But I think of like influencers like JD DeLay, who hangs out with the unsubscribed guys. He's like a former felon. He was in prison. He's openly talked about putting things in his butt. He's been around the block a few times, but now he's very much like you need to behave yourself. And I think it's a good influence in like at least the reformed felon kind of category. But where else do we see this or can see this on the right?
So the only unforgivable sin is blaspheming the Holy Spirit. And that's
facts.
Yes, and that's doubting the Holy Spirit's grace to turn somebody's life around. So I go very liberally. If there's somebody who found God, and there's a lot of people, there's a lot of bad actors. There's a lot of bad actors who are like, I found God, and then they try to have a platform off it after being like a piece of shit their whole life. There are a lot of bad actors, but there are a lot of good actors too. So I try to make it a point to give everybody a little bit of grace. I don't pull up their old tweets and, like try to never forgive them. And when they apologize, you accept that apology. When people apologize and you just double down and be like, oh, so you're admitting that you were guilty and there's no grace there. I don't like that. I think that's ugly. So when it comes to people like Lauren, who may be, I don't know, turning herself around, I'm not sure. She recently came after me on Piers Morgan and I forgave her for that. So it's just a matter of using your own grace. If you're Christian or if you're not Christian, try not to blaspheme the Holy Spirit and give the Holy Spirit the reason of, was it the reason of the doubt? What phrase am I thinking of that I can't think of now?
Benefit of the doubt?
Benefit of the doubt. Yes, thank you. I thought I was having a stroke. Yes, so benefit of the doubt moving forward. I mean, that's what I would recommend doing. There's very few people who I can't forgive. And the hardest thing you can do is forgive someone who's not sorry, because forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you.
Yeah. I don't know. Y'all had some conversations earlier in the night about the MAGA coalition just breaking apart everywhere, and there's a lot of reasons for that.
My position in the MAGA coalition is I believe the holy war is less of a threat than the gay war. I will take my chances with the second coming of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because that's nothing I have power over. I have no power over when that happens. So I do have power over gay wars. So I just choose, I feel like I'm safer with the holy war. So with the coalition shattered, it's just a demoralized people, and they don't have the same priorities as the MAGA coalition, where it's just whatever Trump does, we're going to be in line with. They have a set of values that don't change with Trump changing. So they were non-interventionist from the beginning. Trump was a non-interventionist from the beginning. MAGA was a non-interventionist from the beginning. But the minute they went to war with Iran, MAGA got behind it, and the non-interventionists were like, I don't get behind this. So when it comes to forgiving, I think that's kind of like a different sort of angle, because you're still kind of waiting to see what happens. You know, it's not finalized. Like, I don't know, he could end the war tomorrow. Who knows? You know, so forgiving and just saying, I'm going to vote this way. That people are demoralized. Demoralized people don't vote. They're not ready to forgive. It's not the way that they see this going. So,
and I think if you look at the MAGA coalition, it's very much, I mean, almost everybody in it is in some ways, at least at a significant level, a castaway from an unforgiving cast. Like, I mean, if you think about, I mean, even the early days when you had like the Brett Weinstein Evergreen College affair. I mean, you had a lot of these types of Elon Musk, you know, who was a Democrat, you know, and it was like a lot of people came to MAGA because they were a part of, say, the liberal left, or parts of, you know, parts of other political pockets that were just totally unforgiving, and the purity test was intolerable, and they were sort of cast out with no path to redemption, and they ended up on MAGA Island because it was, you know, the only place that would accept them, and didn't care about the baggage, you know, that they had from you know, their activities and that. I mean, our vice president, J.D. Vance, you know, was a never Trumper in 2016 and voted for Evan McMullen, the CIA agent put up by Bill Kristol. You know, I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, our ODNI chief, was a Democrat in the last election cycle.
Voted for
Bobby
Bernie.
Kennedy ran against Trump in the 2024 election before they joined forces. I mean, half our cabinet secretaries, you know, were at one point hostile, to MAGA and the like, and came from pockets, hostile near and far. And I do think that you lose people. Like, for example, I think that there is a threat that you will have a disaffected MAGA class who voted Trump in 2024, who right now may vote either sit out the midterms or dabble in pockets of Democrat sphere just over the Israel issue, for example. And that's just because of a perceived hostility on portions of the MAGA right that are pro-Israel, and draw a purity litmus test there. And so, like, you see this, and you see it, and vice versa in certain respects. But I see this development with the purity tests developing that way. But at the same time, you do need to hash out these issues. You will have aggrieved junior partners who feel that the senior partners in the coalition are getting everything they want, while they're getting very, little or less of what they want. And so, these disputes do have to be worked out. But, what often happens when they grow too large and unresolved is you have what happened to the Democrats in 2024. When Joe Biden was,
is as a cultural movement gets bigger, so does the purity test. I know y'all are short on time, so I'll just go ahead and get to my shout outs. Josie, please look into the Fat Electrician, Wendigoon, Lore Lodge, and King Trout. I know you have a lot of knowledge on American history, but these guys also have a bunch of other niche American history that I think they'll just kind of maybe round out some of your other experiences. That sounded kind of condescending. I didn't mean it like that. But I don't know. It would be an interesting collab, I think, to see happen. And then also to Brett, if he's even still alive at this point, I think that Citizen Vigilante was just a comedy movie that passed by everybody. That shit was hilarious. It took itself way too seriously. There is a straight up whole 5-minute long sex scene that the dude gets off to. The fact that there's mold on his building that he rents out to the prostitution ring or
saw that
whatever.
part,
He's like,
yeah.
man, these fucking tenants aren't taking care of my property, and he busts a nut. It's kind of
Guy on the
crazy.
building.
It's
that the German
ridiculous.
movie?
Anyways,
Yeah, nobody
y'all have a
goes
good
to
night. Thanks
Uwe
for having me
Boll
on.
Nobody goes to Uwe Boll for subtlety, that is for sure. Like, I will not be psyoped by the right into caring about Uwe Boll movies just because he made a movie about immigration. I don't give a fuck. Like, if I'm supposed to pretend that, you know, Christopher Nolan is the most evil filmmaker of all time now, and Uwe Boll is the way to go, you're too deep into politics at this point.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up for us. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. I appreciate it. Guys, we will see you tomorrow.